All right, good evening, everyone. We're going to reconvene the Brattleboro Select Board meeting. Today is April 4th. We were just in executive session and are taking no action. John, was this meeting properly run?
Yes, Ian, it was.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right, so I'm going to move on to agenda item 2, approval of the minutes, and I would look for a motion. So often, the clerk traditionally makes motions on the minutes. Peter?
I make a motion.
Yes. So if you go to the it's actually not in the so you use the motion usually is I move to approve the minutes, and then you read the minutes out for from the dates.
So I move to approve the minutes from March 21st, 2023 to March 27th, 2023.
Yeah, so Peter has made a motion to approve the minutes of March 21st, 2023 and March 27th, 2023. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions?
I think we have to abstain.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay, so passes 3 and 3 to 0 to 2 abstentions. Great. Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item 3, which is chair remarks. So I want to take a moment to acknowledge that our community has experienced 2 untimely deaths in the past week, and that this is a very traumatic experience for many people in our community, your neighbors, staff at local nonprofits, town staff, including our police and fire officers, and specifically truly tragic for those people and families directly involved. My heart goes out to everyone affected by these events, and my hope is that we can keep working together with resilience and continuous improvement for a future where these types of deaths no longer happen in our community. And I'd like to ask that we take a moment and pause in acknowledgement of this trauma that our community has experienced. Thank you. Further, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the good work of the Vermont State Police Major Crimes Unit and the Vermont State Police Crime Scene Search Team. Their assistance in this last week has been invaluable. Both are highly respected professional teams that consistently respond and support Brattleboro whenever they are called. Further, I'd like to acknowledge and thank Brattleboro police and officers and detectives for their professionalism, as well as our evidence technician and police social worker who responded to a difficult incident yesterday, helping both the staff and residents of this facility as they worked through this immense tragedy. And then finally, I just want to thank them for their compassion and support that they have shown for all the individuals involved in both of these traumatic events that have occurred in the last week. So thank you very much. And with that, I will pass it over to John.
I just had a few things tonight that I wanted to update you on. The first is an update on the situation at 16 Washington Street. And on that, the injunctive relief hearing for April 3rd was postponed to Monday, April 17th at 1 p.m. The Development Review Board hearing on the owner's appeal to the zoning complaint is tomorrow evening, and the owner's appeal to the Board of Health is still to be scheduled. The second thing I wanted to update you on was the fire EMS, and just to let you all know that staff are developing a project plan on the fire EMS work that is to take place from now until the select board's decision in September. Our thinking has been that we would have several touch points with the board and the public over the course of the spring and summer as we investigate the parallel tracks. And that while we will be prepared to bring a staff recommendation for a preferred alternative in September, complete information about all of the alternatives investigated will be presented at that time in September for your consideration. Finally, as you may know, Brattleboro was submitted to the Strongest Town contest, and we made it to the final four. And so I would invite everyone to please go to strongtowns.org to vote. Brattleboro is up against Jackson, Tennessee this time. Voting goes through Thursday, April 6th at noon. And that's all I have, unless you have questions.
Yeah, Liz.
I just want to mention that you don't need to be a Brattleboro resident to vote for Brattleboro.
Oh,
All right. Yeah.
great. Thank you very much, John. Yes, Franz.
Just an inquiry, is it true that Ian Goodnow had a triple double in the quarterfinal round? Never mind.
Right.
So, so we're going to move on to agenda item 5, which is select board comments and committee reports. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge and welcome Peter and Franz to their first Brattleboro Select Board meeting as sworn in members. And just to explain that this is an opportunity to speak to the public on, you know, anything that you want to acknowledge or sort of ask about things going around town. But also later on in the meeting, we're going to appoint ourselves to committees. And if you were to attend a committee session or something, this would be the opportunity for you to sort of tell us about what happened in that session. So so I look to board members if there's any comments or committee reports. Franz.
I have a couple of things I'd like to mention.
Yeah.
One is that I've heard from several people reiterating things that have been said recently, some at representative town meeting and some in other forums, specifically calling for openness and public involvement in some of the important questions that we're going to be looking at over the next, 6 months, certainly, but presumably as a general principle as well. So I just want to throw in once again that I am personally committed to the idea of open discussion, including the public, in appropriate ways at every step along the way, and that I've heard from my colleagues and the administration that they are similarly committed to that process. And I just want to, if anybody's got any doubts about it, I'm putting down a marker on that, and we expect to hear from the public on this, and hope that everybody who's interested joins in the discussion, and that'll unfold step by step, as John described, for example, with regards to the EMS. The other thing is kind of related to this is that I am going to try experimentally having office hours where anybody can just come on in and talk to me about whatever's on their mind. It's going to start a week from tomorrow, Wednesday, at the library in the mezzanine level at 4:30, from 4:30 to 6:30. So I'll be sitting there, and anybody who wants to can come in and we'll talk. I'd like to also say that select board members are welcome to join me in that if they choose and if it's convenient.
No more than two.
No more than one at a time, okay? For open meeting law purposes. But anyway, I just hope may turn into an opportunity for people to, it could be a funnel to get information to the board. I mean, I don't know how it would work, but I think it might be interesting. I think it might even be fun.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Franz. Other board members? Seeing none, we're going to move on to public participation, agenda item 6. So this is an opportunity for the public to speak on an item that is not on the warrant agenda or to request that an item be pulled from the consent agenda. I look to the room first. I don't see any hands in the room, so I will look to Zoom and I see 2 hands on Zoom. Dick DeGray, welcome.
Okay. Am I all set?
Your hand is in the way of the camera.
There you go.
Oh,
Whoops, I got my camera reversed here. Well, either way, I'll give you a nice view of outside.
Yeah.
yeah,
Uh, So Dick DeGray, District 2. And the meeting in March 21st, I know you had missed the meeting. I think it was because of weather. And you did several things on consent agenda. I'm not a big fan of consent agenda, but I don't get a vote. And one of them was EMS. And I'm going to request that you don't put EMS ever again on consent agenda, because I think it's important to go over that. And B, if you can answer this question, if someone from the public requests something to be taken off of consent agenda, does that happen automatically, or does there need to be a vote taken by the board?
Great. Thank you very much.
And actually, I'm not done. If you could answer that question.
I'll let you finish your comment and then we can answer your questions.
Okay, so in the EMS report in 2 weeks, I was very concerned about the EMS report, looking at the financials. Because you're running at a collection rate of about 52%, 8 months in. And we are actually in the 9th month. We only have 3 months left. And so we should have data from back in July of 2022. And I'd like to see included in the next report is the amount billed in July of 2022, the amount collected and what that collection rate is, and what the breakdown is. How many were Medicaid, how many were Medicare, and how many were private insurance. And I certainly, when John was talking about that you're looking at making a decision possibly in September, you're not going to have probably all the financial information in on money taken in. Because I can remember the chief saying it usually takes possibly 2 to 3 months. But we should have some monthly data from July 22, August, and maybe even September, that all that money should have been collected. And I think that will give us, and I'm concerned about the financials, a better picture of what the collection rate is going to be when you break it down into a monthly, when you start giving us those monthly statistics rather than what we're getting right now. Because right now it's a scary picture when you're running only about 52%.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dick. So consent agenda items can be requested to be pulled by a member of the public, and then a board member may, this is under our current rules, which will be considered tonight as well and could be amended. So I'm speaking for just last year, can be requested by a member of the public, and then any one board member may pull an item from the agenda without a vote. So it's simply, if a board member wants to pull an item, they can. It's not automatic. A select board member doesn't have to, a member of the public requests it. Yeah, I hear you, Dick, on the EMS being on the consent agenda. You weren't at the meeting. We talked about it being on the consent agenda. It was basically, we said if anyone wants to pull it, we can, but the agenda setting committee, there were so many things to talk about because we had 2 meetings in one because of the snowstorm. It was also not something that I wanted to do, and I also spoke to the fact that we will not put it on another consent agenda again. So next, yes.
Can I just speak to
Very briefly, and then I want to move on.
very well?
Yes.
The decision to put that particular EMS update on a consent agenda was one that Ian and I made. And part of the thinking was there was actually another substantive EMS item on the regular part of the agenda. So I think if somebody had brought up something related to an EMS update type thing in that part of the meeting, it would have been germane.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Daniel, and I forgot to mention that was an element of it. Great. Any comment public participation? Seeing none, I see one more hand in Kurt and Kurt Dimes, and then we're going to move on.
Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
I've got two comments about the Strong Cities and Towns contest. It's a little bit sad to note that one of the criteria for a strong city is in this competition is the development of non-incremental housing. And that's something that's definitely part of the Brattleboro common sense housing agenda. And I'm afraid that the board is really putting a kibosh on that by incriminating the emergency shelter project we've got going. I first told you all about it in January of 21. It was about housing a police substation. And that program developed into the emergency shelter as well. But it's a bad time to crush that or to try to crush that because it seems that Brattleboro was really not looking for new housing possibilities. Then the other matter was also about housing. Around that same time, BCS submitted to you a proposal for eviction control and rent control. And we suggested, well, that became the, with some changes, Proposition 2 at the last election. But that's not going to happen because it lost in the election because of the very controversial clause about endless leases. I propose that the board should consider an ordinance based on that same legislation that we submitted in 2000 and at the end of 2000, I think. And if you did that, then that could cover the time between now and when we get a petitioned article on the ballot. And that's, for just cause eviction. So I'll submit that to you all, and I hope you'll take a close look. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Kurt. Seeing no further hands, we're going to move on to agenda item 7, the consent agenda. Board members, anyone like to pull any item from the consent agenda?
Yes.
Yep.
There's only one item to pull, so that's the one I'd like to pull.
Okay, Franz would like to pull the archaeological services at 2250 Birge Street authorized contract from the consent agenda. No problem. So what happens is that item goes to the end of the regularly scheduled warned meeting. I don't know if we have any staff member who needs to be here for that.
So
We do. Okay, she's now notified. Excellent.
Sorry, Sue.
Okay, so for those close listeners at home, armchair select board generals, it's going to now be new business agenda item J. Okay, thank you, Franz. Moving on to agenda item 8, new business A, potential action involving opioid litigation. I'm going to turn it over to town attorney Bob Fisher.
Thank you. This agenda item is asking the board to make a motion to authorize the town manager to sign the documents to participate in the state settlement with regard to the opioid litigation involving 5 manufacturers, Teva, Allergan, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, CVS, Walmart, and Walgreens. So what the new board members may not know is the town of Brattleboro is a member of a class action suit along with Bennington and Sharon and other municipalities across the United States in a multi-district suit that is in a special court set up for this opioid litigation in Ohio. So when there is a national settlement that is reached by attorneys general and states across the country with various manufacturers, distributors, et cetera, of opioids, we have the option of going with that state settlement or going along staying the course with our multi-district litigation. The town is represented by a firm in Texas, and it's a recommendation of the attorneys there that you elect to go with the state settlement and authorize John Potter to sign the documents to participate. The reason it's on tonight is the deadline for that participation must be signed on to by April 18th. So thank you for putting it on the agenda with relatively short notice. As far as the overall settlement, the League of Cities and Towns put out a short memo on this. The total amount that Vermont will receive under the settlement with these 5 is about $39.5 million. The allocation of that, 15% will go to Vermont towns, and then each town, depending on population and various other factors, gets part of that 15%. But 70% goes to the statewide opioid abatement fund, and 15% goes directly to the state. So lion's share is going more to the state than to the town. Our counsel on the multi-district case recommended this primarily on the basis of a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, so to speak. Insofar as this is a settlement that's made now, the money will be paid. Different defendants here are paying on different schedules, one lump sum, for instance, but the case that the town is involved in hasn't even gone into the discovery stage. It'll be years before that's tried, and there's always the risk that you may not recover. So the recommendation was take advantage of this. And so it's the recommendation of outside counsel, and based on that recommendation, my recommendation to the board to authorize the town manager to sign the relevant documents.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Attorney Fisher. So board, I'm going to take this opportunity to introduce this new system that I'm hoping that we can implement this year on the select board, that we make a motion now and that we then have discussion on the motion and ultimately amend, vote, or table the motion. So I think Attorney Fisher has given sufficient language, if people were listening closely, to make a motion. Do I have a potential motion? Franz?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I'd be happy to do it, but I'm not sure exactly what to put in.
If it would be a motion to authorize the town manager to sign the documents to participate in the 5 settlements with Teva, Allergen, CVS, Walmart, and Walgreens.
Okay. Do you want to so move it?
So is what he said, is that a
Yeah,
valid
so moved.
motion? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So moved.
So Franz has made a motion to approve to authorize the town manager to sign the appropriate documents for settlement with Teva, Allergen, CVS, Walmart, and Walgreens.
Correct.
Yeah. Discussion or questions for Attorney Fisher? Board members? Daniel.
I mean, the big question is, how much money could the town reasonably expect to receive?
And that I've tried to get a better answer on that, and the short answer is I simply don't know. It's the towns in Vermont that are above 10,000 in population will receive the lion's share of that 15% that's going to that. The smaller towns with populations less than that will receive just a modest sum of money. But I don't think any of this is large amounts of money coming to the town. But I don't know the answer to that.
Liz?
Do we know, has it been prescribed what the state is going to do with their major share?
Only insofar as there is the opioid abatement fund that the state has. As far as its plan, I'm not well versed in what that plan is.
Thank you.
Other board members? Before I open up to public comment?
No, all right, I don't see any hands on Zoom. Oh, no, I do see one. Dick.
Are there any restrictions on the use of the money when we receive it?
I'm gonna let you, Dick, finish your comment, and then we can answer questions that you have.
That was my question.
Okay, thank you. Attorney Fisher?
I'm not exactly sure. It's going to obviously be up to direction from the select board, but the whole idea of these settlements is to address and abate the opioid epidemic. But I don't know the specifics on restrictions of that 15% that would go to the towns.
What is the timeline? I think it's later this summer. Some are paid out over a period of time. One was a lump sum. I don't see in here exactly the expected payout, at least based on the memo that the league put out to all of the towns. So again, I apologize. I don't know the answer to that, but we can find out a rough estimate. Okay.
We have a representative from the league who's in the meeting for another matter. I don't know if she knows much about this, but.
Yeah, I mean, if she wants to raise her hand to speak on this, but there's no pressure, we're gonna speak with her in a little bit or pretty soon on another matter. So board members, other questions or comments for this item? And I don't see anyone in the room wish to speak on this? Seeing none. Okay. So Franz has made a motion to
I don't know if you want me to interrupt. Karen, who I believe is the staff member from the league, is her hand raised.
Oh, okay. Yes, absolutely.
Or had it raised. It's down.
Okay.
Sorry.
So Franz has made a motion to authorize the town manager to sign the appropriate documents for settlements with Teva, Allergen, CVS, Walmart, and Walgreens. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's going to carry 5-0. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Bob, for the presentation. Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item 8B, the Vermont Leagues of Cities and Towns Project-Based Tax Increment Financing TIFs presentation and discussion. And I'm going to just turn it right over, or do you?
Well, I'll just let the board know that we had a request from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns as to whether the town would like to support some pending legislation on project-based tax increment financing. And so we invited Karen Horn to join us tonight to help explain what this is and give us a sense of whether it's something the town would like to support.
Excellent. Karen, welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see you.
Okay, I wasn't in charge of the mute, unmute, it seems. So, okay. My name's Karen Horn, and I'm the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy for the League of Cities and Towns. And if I may, I was trying to unmute for the end of the last conversation. I would just add that there is an opioid settlement advisory committee that was convened as a result of legislation last year, and there are 7 representatives of local government on that committee, including Gwyn Zakoff, who's our municipal policy advocate. So there's lots of discussion about how those opioid settlement funds need to be used at both the local level and the state level. So that's what I know about that at this point. On to the tax increment financing program. we've had a TIF program in Vermont for quite a few years. Every year it seems to get amended in one aspect or another, but essentially a town can have a vote and enact a tax increment financing district. They would establish the boundaries of that district. Generally speaking, it needs to be in a designated area. So I believe you have a neighborhood development area that's designated, and maybe a designated downtown, possibly even a village center on the west side of town. So your tax increment financing district would need to be in one of those areas. And then once the State Economic Progress Council approves, or VEGI is the acronym. I'm sorry, I forget what it stands for, but it's essentially the economic development arm of the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. Once they approve your TIF district, then you can invest in infrastructure, generally things like streetscaping, reconstructing roads, bridges in an area, or water or wastewater. You can use the projected increment, that will be an increase in taxable value as a result of your investments. So the idea is that if you, for instance, invest in wastewater in the downtown area, expanding it, upgrading it, making it available for new development, that then the new development would follow that investment, right? And so when you create your TIF district, there is an agreement about what the taxable value of the properties in that district are at the time the district is created. And then the growth in that taxable value, the increment it's called, is what can be used to repay debt for those kinds of infrastructure investments. The way the program is set up right now, 70% of the new increment may be retained by the town. 70% of the new increment that would ordinarily go to the education fund can be retained by the town for them to repay debt. And 30% of the new increment would go to the education fund. So you only get to keep a portion of the education fund growth, tax growth. You can use as much as 100% of the municipal growth tax increment to reinvest in that project or those projects. And generally the towns make a decision about how much of the municipal tax increment they're going to use to repay those kinds of debts. It cannot be less than the 70% that would be available from the education fund. So that's really kind of a very high level, bare bones discussion of what a tax increment financing program is. There are 10 towns right now that have TIF districts. Bennington is the closest to you, I believe. There are several in Chittenden County, Burlington, Milton, Winooski. Montpelier had a TIF, was awarded a TIF, and they just decided to turn it back. Like they were awarded the TIF, they had it for a couple of years during COVID, and they've decided that their circumstances and the situation has changed enough in Montpelier that they turned that back. So one of the reasons that Montpelier did that is that they really have two pretty distinct project areas. One they're hoping to dedicate to housing, and another which is sort of the downtown State Street, Main Street area of Montpelier, if you've been there. And they only want to do a few projects, right? They don't want to have a huge TIF district. I have to say that the requirements for reporting and audits and keeping up and everything are pretty intense and complex with the TIF district program. But there's been a proposal for several years now that would create kind of a project, what's called a project-based TIF. And so that would be a much smaller district. You would be undertaking essentially just one infrastructure project, and it would involve maybe 5 or 6 properties in the immediate area where there would be development coming in after those infrastructure investments were made, versus the larger TIF district, which might encompass your whole designated downtown or your whole neighborhood growth area, and many parcels, like 20 to 50, or in some cases even 100 parcels in the city of St. Albans and Burlington. So we've really, we believe that this is really the one economic development tool that municipalities would be able to use that is not like a grant or a loan or something that you would have to pay back, but it really puts municipalities in the driver's seat in terms of what kind of development they want to see and where they'd like to focus. The other thing that I wanted to mention just as an introduction is that in most of the TIF districts, they're mixed use. So there's some commercial development, there's some residential development, there's sometimes some of the affordable housing projects go into a TIF district. They sort of need to be balanced with market rate housing projects, because an affordable housing project by itself is not going to actually generate a lot of new increment in property taxes. But and there are in Barry City, they built a new building in the downtown that the Agency of Transportation is in right now. Not as many of them are in it as were before COVID, but they're still in there. So and then several towns, St. Albans City built a hotel and a parking garage. So those are the kinds of projects that municipalities have considered. And we have, with respect to the project-based idea, we've had 11 communities send letters to their delegations, their senators and representatives, asking for the enactment of a project-based TIF program. There's about 5 other municipalities that are interested. There is a bill right now in the House Ways and Means Committee that they are making some amendments to the TIF, the regular TIF program. You may know that the chair of that committee is your representative, Emily Kornheiser. So that's really what the program is about at the highest level. I'm happy to answer questions that can get fairly complicated. It also is a resource that somebody like Brattleboro, with your wonderful downtown and all the sort of amenities that you have and that you also have in your plans, might really benefit from. So
Excellent. Thank you very much Karen, for the presentation. That was very helpful for me. Having read the backup material, I think I kind of understood what this was about. I now have a much better understanding of it after your presentation. I think just to provide a little clarity for the board and for the public, what's being asked of us this evening is whether the select board would direct the town manager's office to essentially write a letter of support for the project-based TIF initiative, which I'm not quite sure if that is based in the bill that's in the House Ways and Means Committee, or if that's a separate discussion, but that's kind of what we're considering this evening. Is that accurate?
Yes, absolutely. So, thank you. There is a bill in the Senate Finance Committee, S-83, that is a project-based TIF bill. That's all that bill discussed. That bill did not make crossover, which means it didn't get out of the Senate in time to be considered by the other chamber, the House. So right now we're at the point where if a project-based TIF program is to, if we're able to get that to move, that concept to move, it would have to be appended to another bill. But you don't need to go into the weeds like that. You could just say that if you are interested in writing such a letter, that you have an interest in a project-based TIF program, and that it is an instrument that the town might consider using, has a project that would benefit from it at this point in time, or, really, it's your letter. Could you say what?
Great. Thank you, Karen. So board members, I think before we I'm not sure if we quite have a motion yet, so we can have a little discussion first. Questions or comments? Franz?
I'm just wondering who this letter should go to.
To the legislature.
It would go to your legislator. So Senator Harrison and Senator Hashim and Representative Kornheiser, and I know you have another rep.
Two more reps.
Two more.
Or,
Big Brattleboro.
yes. So that's who you would direct the letter to.
Okay, thank you.
Other board members? I have a question. John, do you think there are any projects in the downtown district that could potentially be something that we would consider for a project-based TIF? Should this legislation move forward?
I don't know. I think that having this as a possible tool to use could generate a project that might want to take advantage of.
Okay.
That would have, so that would have been
Peter?
my question. So if we authorize the letter, which seems like we don't necessarily have to use it, or we could adapt it to something that comes up along the way.
Yeah. In fact, I think if anything, we could, as Karen stated, we can really frame the letter any way we'd like. And if it's simply speaking in support of this tool for municipalities across the state to use. Two that come to mind are like in my head are just the island. I don't know if that counts as being part of the downtown or not. And then obviously the transportation center. Liz.
I think the island's in New Hampshire.
Yeah, that's true.
I would,
But maybe there's, I don't know.
I would advocate for having every tool that's possible in our toolbox.
Absolutely. Franz.
In the interest of our new motion-based protocol, I would make a motion at this point.
Wow, 2 motions in a row, Franz. Exciting. Go ahead.
It is very exciting. So I'd like to make a motion to instruct the town manager to write and send a letter to our legislative delegation in support of legislation to approved project-based tax increment finance districts.
Parentheses, TIFs.
Excellent.
Parentheses, TIFs. I accept
Franz
your friendly amendment.
Has made a motion. Discussion? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to the public and see any hands. I see one. Dick?
Yeah. So if you're looking, give me a little bit more clarity on, we already have a DID. And would this supersede the DID or work if you chose to use it downtown? Or would it be in conjunction with having a TIF and a DID? If Julie could, and I'm going to hang, I may have a follow-up.
I'm going to let you finish your question and then will answer your questions.
Well,
So you
I
got
need
another
to,
one?
well, I'd like a little bit more clarity on that, because with the DID, obviously the 83 buildings in the DID, they have a separate assessment. And I'm trying to get a little bit better understanding on what the TIF district would encompass and how that would affect the existing buildings in the TIF district.
Okay, thank you, Dick. So I think the question's fairly clear. We're kind of talking more about project-based TIFs, which would not require the designation of a TIF district, where the TIF district designation is something that already exists in the state and in fact are implemented in 10 communities across Vermont. But for the board and the public's education, Karen, if you wouldn't mind speaking to it for a moment, what is the interaction between a DID district and a TIF district? And are there any communities that currently have that relationship?
So I apologize. DID.
Downtown improvement district.
Oh,
Am I getting it right, or am I?
It's a special assessment district.
Special assessment district.
right. So that's an interesting idea. I think that the other special assessment district that I'm familiar with is Church Street up in Burlington. And Church Street is, I believe, part of one of their TIFs. They have 2 TIF districts. And what you would need to sort out is what's the original taxable value, like fair market value of the properties in the improvement district if you were going to have your TIF be there. So you could, and if you had infrastructure projects in that area, you could use some of the proceeds of the TIF increment in concert with some of your special assessment district funds to sort of move those projects ahead. I'm not familiar with exactly your improvement district, so I can't speak too specifically about it, but the idea is that this would be one more tool that you could use to move those projects ahead. If you want to go a little farther down that road, you might want to have Abby Sherman, who is the director of the veggie program, come talk to you about that. I mean, definitely, if you're moving down that road, you do want to have her come.
And Karen, do I understand correctly that the project-based TIF program would not require a designation of a TIF district?
You would need to designate a district, but it would be a small district, right? It would be, so if you were, say you were doing streetscaping and lighting in a small area of town just to benefit or to grow development in 5 or 6 properties, you would draw the boundaries like that. But yeah, I think you would still have to draw some boundaries around what would be a smaller area.
Okay. John?
Yeah, I don't think that it necessarily has to be associated with the downtown. It could be any properties out that, within our service area that we might want to provide additional services to.
Yeah. And to that point, John, sorry to interrupt, but the law's not written yet. So
right. That's it.
We could for that kind of flexibility.
Yeah, and maybe we could include language in the letter about that relationship between an improvement district and a project-based TIF. I don't know if that would be something that we would want to include, but Daniel?
I guess I wanted to just get clear. So we're talking about a tool to finance public infrastructure.
Yeah.
And so, for example, one of the big projects that the community is aware of is Winston Prouty's, attempts to develop a large amount of housing on their land, right? We don't own that land. We don't even have infrastructure in that land at this time. We have some,
Correct.
but not to the extent.
The level of water and sewer.
So I guess I'm kind of curious. I don't know, Karen, if you're even aware of this project, but it's a large project and hope it works out. Is this a kind of tool? And I'm sort of looking at Sue and I'm seeing Patrick nodding to the side. Is this tool something that could be used to make that project more viable?
I think, a lot depends on the outcome of legislation, and legislation is a murky process.
Let me backtrack a little bit.
Project-based TIF
Yes.
is a tool, like Liz said, it's a tool for the toolbox, so that's a good thing. And yeah, it's the type of thing that could facilitate development in a project like that. There's going to be a lot of public infrastructure that would need to go into supporting that type of activity, and this would be a reasonable tool that the state makes available to municipalities that allows us not just to provide like a tax stabilization program for the municipal portion, but to retain a certain portion of the state education tax for use in retiring debt necessary to improve public infrastructure.
Daniel?
If the project-based TIF legislation does not go forward, would the current TIF district program be applicable to the Winston Prouty?
No, it's geographic.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I'm seeing shaking of head at the back of it. I mean, maybe it's not definitive. I don't know, but it's a question that we should explore.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with where it is, but is it in your neighborhood development area or your designated downtown or?
No, it's not in any of those
Our
areas.
planning director is shaking her head.
It would have to be, this would be a perfect example of a project related to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay, other board members, questions, comments? No? All right, so I can't see if there's the mouse is in the way. Dick, did you have a follow-up or is your hand down? Your hand is up. I'm asking you to keep it brief because you've spoken once on the topic already.
No, I didn't have a follow-up. Thank you.
Oh, okay, great. Great. So with, in that case, Franz has made a motion to instruct the town manager to write and send a letter to our legislative delegation in support of legislation to approve project-based TIFs, tax increment finance districts TIFs. Is that the friendly amendment?
Yes, that's fine.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's going to carry 5-0. Karen, thank you so much for coming and giving that presentation. It was really helpful. And good luck on advocating for this good legislation.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate the invitation.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item 8C, which is the Windham Regional Commission. And we're going to start with the Brattleboro Commissioner's annual report to the Select Board. Welcome.
I'll invite Sue Billion and Raul Lima to join us.
My bad. Yes. Welcome both to the meeting.
Thank you.
Turn it over to Sue first.
All right. Well, we are here tonight to give you an annual report on our activities and kind of a broad overview of the activities of the Windham Regional Commission in the last year. Both Ralph and I were appointed as commissioners to the Windham Regional Commission last, I think, mid-March. And each community, there's 27 towns in the Windham Regional Commission area, service area. And each town except for Searsburg has 2 representatives. So we are appointed by the select board. The Windham Regional Commission is a quasi judicial government kind of arm where they do a lot of kind of planning around transportation, land use, emergency management, housing, energy, economic development, and they're supported by federal funding that they might seek, state funding. They have a lot of state contracts, and by a local share, kind of an assessment that the towns pay per person. And so they, like I mentioned, they are kind of they're represented, two members of every town kind of represented, and then there's some other citizen interest commissioners that they appoint in topics like healthcare, tourism, a couple of other special interest areas. So currently there's full commission meetings that are meeting quarterly, sometimes every other month. And over the last year, there were a couple of different topics presented. I think the 2 main issues that were discussed was authorizing the Windham Regional Commission to enter into intermunicipal service agreements. And these might be for services or supplies to kind of assist the towns in the region. It could be a position, for example, several towns might need an animal control officer, or they might need a zoning administrator. If you kind of think some of the smaller towns in the area, they might not have enough work or expertise to kind of fully staff those positions. So they could enter into agreement with Windham Regional Commission, and they might be able to hire that person that will work with several towns. And then it would also apply to bulk purchasing of supplies like sand or culverts, could be shared equipment like mowers or line striping equipment. So they are now enabled to enter into intermunicipal agreements. We had to change the bylaws of the Windham Regional Commission to be able to do that. And that is just something select boards can take advantage of if there was something that you wanted to speak to about them. One of the other changes that they made, or that they're kind of transitioning to, is about how they do their transportation planning work. So there's committee structures within the Windham Regional Commission, and each committee commissioner is kind of serves on different committees. And Ralph and I will talk about the committees that we served on. There is a transportation committee, and they do a lot of ranking of projects for the state. And so the way it's been is there's a very few members that are ranking projects for the whole 27 town area. And so they want to try to increase participation in that committee. And so they're taking the transportation committee and they're reformatting it into a transportation advisory committee that will be a larger group. Each town can have a representative on it. And then there's also kind of special interests, Southeast Vermont Transit, maybe some of the other social service agencies that rely on public transportation or the transportation network. So they could also have representatives. And so that way there's more people making decisions on the transportation priorities for the region. And then in particular for the town, we have an assessment every year. This past year, or I think for this fiscal year, it's about 30,000. So it's an assessment of about $2.50, a little bit more per person. They do, we work with them a lot on mapping and sometimes on traffic data collection. They can do pedestrian counts and bicycle counts. They've done that before for us. They've done some work with the Agricultural Advisory Committee and kind of mapping our farmlands and kind of inventorying that, and are in the process of creating a digital map for that. So those are kind of projects that we've been working on with them throughout the year. I think some of the highlights of their the fiscal year 23, their fiscal year is October 1st to September 30th. So we're kind of in the midst of their fiscal year 23. Some of the highlights are they are working on an update to the Windham Regional Plan. It was, last adopted in I think it was 2014 was the last plan. So they are making this a web-based plan, and they're hoping to have drafts available for kind of public review and discussion later this summer. And then they'll have public hearings. But that regional plan kind of guides their work. And then it also has some standing in Act 250 proceedings and Section 248 proceedings for energy projects. And then another priority for them this year is kind of concluding their Windham Wood Heat Initiative, which has been a program that's been around. I think it came about with the closure of Vermont Yankee and kind of a settlement to have clean energy development fund created. And I think the thing to know about here is they currently have funding set aside for Brattleboro. We had talked with them about having a modern wood heat project for this building. So I think there'll probably be some discussions of trying to figure out, will it be used, or what can it be used for? So, so that's something that they're looking to wrap up, and that kind of directly involves us. And then I kind of talked about their transitioning of the transportation planning and how that will work. So just real briefly, I've served on the Planning Coordination Committee. It's kind of we are looking at town plans of other communities in the region, and the town plans are adopted by the locality, and then they're approved by the Windham Regional Commission. And then if you haven't adopted an approved plan, you're eligible for certain grant funding from the state. So it's kind of a perfunctory role that they play. I've sat on that committee. We review the other town plans as they're adopted by the towns and they seek approval. This past year, we approved Guilford and Marlborough, two of our neighbors' plans. And we also have to make sure that they meet the state statute planning goals. And then I also serve on the Brownfields Committee, as does Ralph. I've been a long-term member of it. Ralph joined in December. And so that is, they have EPA funds for the assessment of brownfield sites. So brownfields are sites with real or perceived contamination. So yeah, at the start of it, it's a perception. So you might go by some fenced up site and think, there was some, chemicals used on that site. Maybe it's contaminated. And the idea of these funds is we want to be able to redevelop the site. And so we're looking at them trying to figure out, is there contamination? If there is, what are the resources to help make them safer sites? And so they've had a program running since the early 2000s. We had a program for several years because there were so many sites in Brattleboro that the town also could do the work. They've assisted on 5 sites in Brattleboro. I think noteworthy are 2 of the projects that the town has been working a lot with, both Tri Park and to some extent Winston Prouty. So, in those situations, they were maintenance yards or kind of oil tanks that may have been on the property that they were doing a little investigation around. And then the Windham Regional Commission also has a revolving loan fund for cleanup of where there is actual contamination on a site. And so they have worked on 3 sites in Brattleboro with that. And so they're either low interest loans or grants. And so again, these are just tools to kind of help development in the community. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ralph, who can talk about his committee work.
Thanks. So yes, I'm also a member of the Brownfields Committee, but I've only attended 1 meeting so far. I think that the email came out today for the scheduling of the next meeting. So I'm just getting my feet wet there. The other I joined was energy, and I've been to 3 of those meetings. I would say the overall concern over at least the past sort of half year that I've been aware of is drafting the energy section of the next regional plan. And we haven't actually seen any drafts yet. We're still in sort of like a forum mode, talking about different subjects in order to be able to, I guess, assess where people's interests and concerns are so that it can gradually turn into text that then gets incorporated into the regional plan. The subjects that have come up have been, they've ranged from very broad things like, what is resiliency, to a much more narrow focus on putting language in the regional plan that encourages towns to develop renewable energy siting ordinances or guidelines. That's something that I'm also aware of professionally. If you look at the 27 towns in the Windham Regional Commission's territory or other RPCs, there tends to be a huge variety of different approaches that different towns take. Brattleboro has a pretty well-developed solar siting set of guidelines. I don't think it's really an ordinance, but it's a set of guidelines. There are different forms that this can take, and I think that we had some debates about things like what is utility scale renewable energy, and how much should the regional plan be concerned with all different forms of renewable energy as opposed to the ones that seem to be happening the most in our region currently, like solar. So this is all still in a state of discussion, and I don't know enough yet about the process to know where the conversation from last meeting is going to go in the next meeting. But I'm pretty sure that Margot Gia, who coordinates the Energy Committee, is capturing what different people have to say. And I think I actually saw some email about this recently. By, I guess, early summer, we should have enough drafts to be able to actually work on something concrete, as opposed to having these very broad conversations about energy. One thing I will say about the energy topic is that I think, from time to time, really big issues drive the WRC or Brattleboro. Things like, whether or not biomass energy is going to be adopted, or big transmission projects. And from what I can tell, we're in a sort of a quiet period right now, that we're not being driven by a major energy concern like Vermont Yankee or something like that. So it's an opportunity to try to get a kind of a balanced and well thought through energy section in the regional plan that isn't sort of like all about the big subject of the day. Is there anything else that I should speak to as far as energy is concerned? We've summarized it in the report here as well.
I guess just finishing up on the energy part, Windham Regional Commission has done a lot of work with local ARPA and just kind of sharing information. And then they're also there's a new program that's out. It's the Municipal Energy Resilience Program. Stephen Dotson, our sustainability coordinator, has been having conversations with them, and you'll be hearing more about that program. But there is funding available for municipalities in the topic of energy resilience and reducing energy use, curbing greenhouse gas emissions, promoting weatherization, thermal improvements and stuff. So there's more to come on that, and the Regional Commission is helping facilitate that information to the towns.
Great.
Yeah, and I should close, I guess, that this is the report. The Windham Regional Commission is looking for appointments. Again, they're one-year appointments. Ralph and I are both willing to serve. It's kind of been a long-standing, but you could always change it, that the planning director has been one of the appointees.
Excellent. Sue, Ralph, thank you very much for the presentation. So board members, there are two motions that are for our consideration, and that I guess there's only one in our sort of support agenda, but there are two in the backup material. And I guess when we get a report, usually the board accepts it. So I'd look for a motion on that before we have some discussion.
A motion.
Yep.
That we accept.
Yep. So Peter's made a motion to accept the Brattleboro Windham Regional Commissioners report to the select board. Any discussion? Yeah, Liz.
Well, I've been a commissioner of the Windham Regional Commission, and I note that this is one of the agencies that require a per capita funding. And as a consequence, Brattleboro always pays the largest share. And I'm always watchful that we're getting our money's worth. because generally, the Windham Regional Commission is a greater support to smaller towns that don't have planning staff. But from what I've heard, and I'm watchful for that, but what I've heard this evening from both Sue and Ralph is that I think that we do receive services appropriate to the town of Brattleboro. And they're sophisticated services about brownfields and other mapping and loans. And so I thank the Windham Regional Commission, and I thank Sue and Ralph for this report and for their service.
Other board members? My only thought is later on in this agenda, and certainly in the coming weeks and months, the board's going to be considering goals for this year and maybe goals that could continue into next year. And my hope would be that at least a representative of you could be a part of that discussion as we are considering maybe anything that the board could be working on that the Windham Regional Commission thinks is important that the town of Brattleboro specifically could be working on in this coming year on this select board. Yeah, thank you. All right, I'll open up to the public if there's any. I don't see any. In that case, board Franz? Yeah.
I just want to make sort of a personal comment here, which is, I've known about the Windham Regional Commission for a very long time. And having read through your report, I was struck by the fact that I really don't understand much about it, what it does, quasi judicial. I don't know what judicial processes are involved. I just, having lived here and actually been concerned about public affairs for a long time, most of this is actually a mystery to me. So I don't know why I say that other than that to say I have a lot to learn. There's a lot in here that I really didn't understand. I don't think we should try to sort through it right now, but I'll look forward to learning more about it and maybe in the future having an opinion or two.
Sue.
I just want to correct. I'm sorry if I said quasi judicial. I'm thinking about the DRB tomorrow night. They're quasi governmental. So think they're because Vermont doesn't have counties, they kind of perform the county function, but they don't have, they have an assessment for us, but they can't tax. They can receive funds from the state, they can receive federal funds, they can apply for grants. So they're kind of like a town in that way. But
do you make, as commissioners, do you make decisions that then Brattleboro has to live by or execute those decisions on your behalf?
Yes and no. So in terms of the budget, the commissioners do approve the budget, which then results in the assessment to the town of Brattleboro, but that's the only way. The Windham Regional Commission can't compel the town to do something. They don't have that authority.
May I?
Yeah, Liz.
It's a regional planning agency that they get some money from each town. They get some money from the state. They also charge as if they were a consulting firm for particular services to particular towns. But they generally have a wide range of planning on their plate. And it ranges from, as Ralph said, energy to land use planning and provides a regional service in that way.
Thank you.
Is one of the reasons why it's kind of a confusing or kind of odd thing to explain is that because we don't have like a county level government, does this structure exist in states where there's a more significant county level government system?
I believe so. I've only worked in states without strong county government. So
okay.
Yeah, I think if I'm correct, there are 13 so-called RPCs around the state, regional planning commissions. The one over in Bennington is the Bennington Regional Planning Commission. And so they're sort of like a collaborative statewide of people who look at planning and at brownfield funding and project management. And you know, a lot of other things that have to do with natural resources and the environment and transportation that, you know, really should be looked after closer to the grassroots than the state can achieve. But are things that involve, you know, multiple towns. And one example is there was something that came out about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago called Act 174. And it's the typical sort of thing where the legislature delegated to the regional planning commissions the job of making sure that that town planning and energy planning in particular was being done in a correct fashion at the town level. So, you know, the RPCs were tasked with helping to implement statewide voluntary guidelines for energy planning at the town level, which was wrapped up with a whole structure that was created called substantial deference.
Yeah.
It had
Enhanced municipal.
Yeah, it created a template for town energy plans that if the template was followed, the towns would have basically more standing, they'd have more say when it came to energy decisions by the Public Utilities Commission. So that's just one example of a sort of middle level of government task that the RPCs are assigned, because it wouldn't make any sense at either the state or the town level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great question, Franz. I think I see a hand in the public. Rick?
Hi there. Welcome to the new board. I'm with you, Franz. I'm just getting up to speed also.
You know the drill.
Rick Spray, District 3. Sorry.
Thank you.
Getting too familiar here. I am thrilled to hear that we're not putting out any fires or distracted by big projects that are driving the agenda, and that especially you with your depth of experience in the energy field are taking a bit of a lead in that area of trying to figure out how we move forward in a sane and planful way. So thumbs up. Excited.
Great.
I hope you keep this light.
Thank you very much, Rick. All right, board. Any other questions? Got a pending motion? Seeing none, Peter has made a motion to accept the report from the Brattleboro's Windham Regional Commission commissioners to the select board. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's going to carry 5-0. There's a second motion that I would consider at this time. Who was interested in making it? Daniel Quip.
I move to reappoint Sue Fillion and Ralph Mymer as Brattleboro commissioners to the Windham Regional Committee.
Discussion.
Thanks for your service.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for all the work and coming and giving us a presentation. How do you pronounce your last name?
Mima.
Excellent. Okay, Daniel has made a motion to appoint Sue Fillion and Ralph Mima as Brattleboro commissioners to the Windham Regional Commission. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Carries 5-0. Thank you again very much.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right, so we're gonna move on. I think Sue may be staying. Or no, we've been switching it up. Okay, so we're gonna move on to new business agenda item 8D, which is the Hazard Mitigation Plan Progress Report and State Mitigation Plan Feedback. Brian, welcome.
Hi, Brian Bannon, Planning Department, and two related matters, the annual report on the town hazard mitigation plan, and related, the state is seeking feedback on their 5-year update of their hazard mitigation plan. So to start with the local, we do a 5-year plan. We started developing the current plan in 2021, was adopted in 2022. So we're 1 year in. The major hazard mitigation steps that have taken place in town are the Melrose relocation, the Mountain Home Park relocation of vulnerable homes, and the project that's being hopefully done this summer at 250 Birge Street to restore floodplain. Combined, the projects will remove about 20% of the dwelling units that are actually in the special flood hazard area. And that 20% of dwellings are the ones that have been most vulnerable to flooding in the past. So just a really tremendous reduction in the risk that people in town are facing. The restoration projects also offer protection to nearby properties. And we saw that this year when there was December 24th flooding. The Melrose restoration project worked as planned. Yes, if the engineers were out there testing it the next day to see where the water flowed.
There we
it
go.
flowed where it was supposed to and
Nice.
at the levels intended. And it meant that Glen Park, which is directly upstream, was not flooded and was not evacuated. So for Christmas Eve, people got to stay safe in their homes, and it's because the project worked. There are other projects that the plan intended to happen, but some of them will not happen. The Planning Commission was looking at tougher regulations, but they would have had an unreasonable impact in the Planning Commission's estimation on redeveloping sites at Mountain Home Park because they would require higher elevation. So the commission felt at this time that particular project should not be pursued. There's some others where we have limited staff capacity, and we will fit those in if possible. And then there are others that are pending funding. And those in particular are shallow flooding on our street networks, which require some improvements to our stormwater collection system. There's some funding out there, and the state has been helping us with a stormwater master plan. So hopefully as that matures and is adopted, we can move forward with some of those projects that would mitigate flooding in the downtown, Main Street, Flat Street, Elm Street area. So I think those are the major projects there. Then the state is getting their 5-year update of their plan. And they're asking a series of questions and asking for feedback from communities. And those are, which individuals or groups within your community would be most harmed by or have the most difficult time recovering from natural hazard events? Frontline community members. How does the town get information about the needs and interests of its frontline community members? What have you already done to prepare for significant weather events in your community and protect residents from natural hazard impacts? What else would you like to do to protect your residents from natural hazard impacts? What would you need to make that happen? If funding is a need, what is the two biggest barriers to obtaining funding? So we address some of that in our own local hazard mitigation plan. The people who are most vulnerable are low-income people. Oftentimes their housing is in areas with flood hazard. That's the greatest risk they face. We also have a lot of low-income people who have they don't have access to cooling, and that's an increasing risk as we face hotter summertime temperatures and heat waves. And of course, we also have people who are vulnerable to cold because they are unhoused or inadequately housed. In addition, as far as doing mitigation projects, staffing is typically one of the big barriers because these projects do take quite a bit of time to work. The timelines can also be a barrier, with some projects taking as long as 10 years to implement, like the Melrose relocation. And then there are also barriers because of project matches. And again, a number of those projects that are listed in our mitigation plan would require matches. And at this point, we have not identified those. And if we're going to exploit state grant funds, that's something that we would need to identify. So if anybody has any additional comments that they would like to see addressed to the state, we can pass those along.
Great. Brian, thank you very much for the presentation. Board, there's no motion that needs to be considered for these two items, but we can have plenty of discussion or questions on either of the topics. So I'll open up to you first. Liz.
My favorite project on this list, Brian, is the Stormwater Utility Enterprise Fund that has user fees on impervious surfaces, including those of I-91. Where are we on that? Do you know?
Sure. So currently the state has got put up some funding for a stormwater master plan. An engineering firm has been hired and they're in the later stages of making that plan. They've identified potential projects across town that would improve water quality and also help with infiltration, so address some of that localized flooding. And I think that would form part of the basis of utility. We haven't focused really exclusively on getting the utility enacted though. And right now, I think there's staff constraints on actually getting that done.
I didn't hear that last thing you said.
There are staff constraints on getting it done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would urge the town manager to light a fire on that. Because it will increase revenue to the town.
But while that's a limitation, the work that is being done is foundational to actually getting the utility set up.
Thank you.
When we have that in hand, we can take the next step.
Other board members?
I don't quite get the bigger picture here of, what our relationship as the select board is to this very interesting matrix of projects. How much should I be worried about the individual items? And how does this fit into sort of other things that I would notice about happening in the town, or just, I don't know, I need a little more context. I don't necessarily need to understand it all right now, but I'm just trying to figure out how, what should I be looking at here?
So Brattleboro's participation in the National Flood Insurance Program Community Rating System, CRS, requires that there be an annual progress report presented to the select board. So that's for the first agenda item. And then the second agenda item is the state asking us questions about their 5-year plan and for how our town and our community is impacted by specifically flood or just hazard mitigation generally.
All hazards.
And so the question to us is more from what Brian spoke on his work of everyone who's worked on that element. Are there other things that the select board wants to see included in the answers to the state's questions?
So there's kind of two memorandums here.
Correct.
And I gather the first one is about the progress of the plan that was adopted a year ago. And then the second memorandum is, hey, what do you think of the state's approach to this?
And our answers to the state's questions.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I just want to speak to, I have like a special place in my heart to the hazard mitigation plan because I served on the hazard mitigation committee, which is one of the ones that we'll appoint a little later on when we were making the plan. I think this more speaks to the second agenda item as to our response to the state, and that, hazard mitigation is so critical in this community because, like many communities in this country, it's the most low income members of our community that are highly impacted by hazards that impact us. And the work that we do to try to mitigate that is going to most benefit those lower income peoples. And I think that's really important work. It's important work to elevate. It's important work for the board to hear about. And we're clearly working on it. And I'm grateful for that. So thank you for the presentation. And I would really commend that focus in our response to the state's questions. Other board members?
Well, I just would add that the tri-park response is the perfect example
Absolutely.
of that focus.
I completely agree. Yeah. I'm going to turn it over to the public. Just don't see any hands. Absent any other select board questions or comments, we're just going to thank Brian very much for your presentation. And we're going to move on to the next agenda item. So we're going to move on to agenda item 8E, which is RTM follow-up, and I'm going to toss that over to John.
Yeah, so every year at this time following the representative town meeting, the staff will bring you follow-up items in the form of a memo, which we have here. There were 2 follow-up items from the recent town meeting that we felt required immediate action. One was to finalize the budget with the $350,000 addition that was made at RTM. So the updated budget is provided in the packet for you and for the public. The second item involved a resolution that was made in support of Congress fully funding the Section 8 housing voucher program. And that resolution in its entirety has now been forwarded by the town to to each of the legislators in Congress. So that one has been done. Then the other few items that we noted and will be incorporating into the work plan as we move forward are the guidance on the human services budget of 2% of the fiscal 24 budget to be the guideline on developing the fiscal 25 proposed budget that we will bring to the select board. And then the other two items are involving the EMS delivery and the solution that we are going to develop for EMS, and providing a process for public input on the ARPA allocation. And both of those we will be working on in the months to come. So that's pretty much our report on RTM, and happy to take any other suggestions or advice from the board.
Great. Thank you very much, John. Again, this isn't one that requires a motion, just any questions or comments from the board or the public. So I'll just look to you all, see if there's any questions. See you, Frick, but I'm going to see the select board questions.
I was actually there.
Yeah. And I think for, as far as just keeping the record clear here, the FY24 budget increase of $350,000, that's binding decision of RTM. The other items are non-binding, but as is our want and practice, the select board likes to follow RTM's non-binding resolutions, and but that is really up to the select board. So if you had differing opinions about that, this would be one of the times to speak on it. Absent that, I look to Frick.
Frick's Pride District 3. Sorry, I had to step out for a moment to talk to
We sent it. That's what you're asking. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So any other questions? Oh, you guys got one.
Looks like Bob Oser.
Yes.
Hello, Bob Ozer. Can you hear me?
Yes.
District 3, Bob Ozer. So I just wanted to share this with respect to evaluating the EMS delivery system. I ran across the other day some testimony that you can all watch if you want, but on March the 22nd at about 10 a.m., the Vermont House Healthcare Committee took testimony on H263. And so if you go to YouTube and you go to the Vermont House Healthcare Committee, for that date and time, you can find the recording of that testimony. And I thought it was very helpful. If you want a cheat sheet on that, go in about an hour in that hour and 40-minute testimony, and you'll get a good overview of the status of EMS in Vermont and why H263 was introduced by Representative Sims. Will Moran, who is with the Vermont Department of Health EMS office, testifies in that. Is it Gwen Zadoff of Vermont League of Cities and Towns also testifies. So I think it's very helpful. If anyone, wishes to view that testimony and has difficulty finding the links, they can reach out to me, but it should be pretty easy by going to the Vermont House Healthcare Committee and look for March 22nd at 10 a.m. And I think it's a good bookmark for the future for us as we study the issue.
Great. Thank you very much, Bob. seeing no other hands, and no other questions, newer select board members, I'm conscious of maybe giving you a little bit more time to think on things, so I'm just trying, please wave your hand if I'm moving too quickly and you want to speak on something. But not seeing any others. Nope. Okay, so I think we can move along to, there's no motion required, so we're going to move along to agenda item 8 F, which is the select board housekeeping. Super fun. So we're going to move first to I, which is the rotation schedule for reviewing and signing warrants. So as I was just notified a little earlier, I am actually a little late in signing one. So for new board members, the warrants are basically approving its expenditures and what else? It's like the payroll contracts,
Payroll and bills.
and it's bi-weekly, I believe. Is it weekly or?
Oh,
it's like,
It's bi-weekly
Yeah.
and it's not the payroll. That's a separate thing. These are the warrants for the contracts and.
oh, so is this a separate one to
Yeah.
the,
We do salary as well.
we do salaries?
We do-
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a separate process, I think.
No,
Either way,
Yep.
when we appoint select board members to the schedule, they're gonna look at both.
Oh, okay.
So, and the idea is, you kind of do your due diligence, you review, the document that's sent, you review it. If you have any questions, you send the questions. It's important to note that the questions that you send will be part of the public record when the board approves the warrants, when they come before them in the agenda. So, keeping that in mind when you email and ask a question is always a good idea, in my opinion. So,
All this stuff at the back of the binder.
yes,
but of course, you're gonna have questions. I mean, don't be shy.
yeah, and in fact,
Because you have to
I wonder if
understand what we're
my
looking at.
alliteration answer may have gotten in here, but I don't see it. No, it hasn't, unfortunately. So anyhow, so we split it up amongst the 5 of us. I'm on page 57 of 132 in our backup material. So the dates are April 4th to July 4th, July 4th to October 3rd, October 3rd to December 12th, December 12th to January 9th, and January 9th to March 31st. This used to be much more of a process because you used to have to come and sign the warrants in person. But because due to COVID, the rules around this have changed and you're now allowed to e-approve. And so we used to like plan them around summer vacations and stuff so that people weren't away and unable to. Now you're allowed to approve it by email, which makes it much more flexible. But what we do try to do is keep in mind people's schedules and try not to assign the warrant period that would be like particularly inconvenient. So I'm gonna give it first come, first serve on this. Liz?
I'd like the January 9th to March 31st.
Liz, you got it. Anyone else? I'm gonna start just assigning them at any moment.
I picked that date.
That's the first one.
The next one that's first out, I like your thinking, Peter.
I picked that date because I won't be running for reelection and
Ah,
I wouldn't interfere with anybody else.
Right.
Well, I'm not studying for a bar exam this year, so I can take any of these months. Let's see, I can do, I prefer not to do the first one because I'm currently in mine, so I don't want to go again.
So give it to Franz.
Franz, you want to do it? First one?
Yeah,
Great. Daniel,
the only
July
problem is
4th,
I don't
October?
know what I'm gonna actually do.
I will
So,
help
do you
you.
have like a little training?
Yeah.
Session?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And Peter, same as well. Give you a little training. So Daniel, Ian. Okay, so for the record, Franz, Daniel, Ian, Peter, Liz. Is that clear? Yep. Excellent.
So when do I start?
You already did today.
And you're late.
Okay, well, let me get right down to it. Vendor 1101, Amazon Capital Service.
That's already done.
Now, we spent
It's already done.
$136.44. How do I know that was the right amount?
Okay, so
Yeah,
we'll get to that. Okay, so now we go on to F2, which is the annual select board assignments, boards and committees. Okay, so there are the following one-year select board member appointments that need to be made tonight. There's Capital Grant Review Board, Hazard Mitigation Committee, that's the one I was referring to in the last agenda item. Rental Housing Improvement Program Loan Committee, Small Business Assistance Program Loan Committee, Traffic Safety Committee, and then there are a couple alternates that we need to potentially reappoint as well. So, Liz.
Well, Daniel suggested that I join the Traffic Safety Committee last year, and I must say, I'm quite enamored of the committee. I think we do good work, and I'd like to continue.
Oh, and you've already written your name in there, which is a pretty bold maneuver in my opinion.
Not in red.
Just in case you forgot.
Yeah.
So this is usually the gladiatorial combat committee to determine who gets on it, because this is the most popular one on the select board and in years past.
Which one's that?
The traffic safety.
You will get no fight from me.
Okay,
All right.
Peter doesn't care. Franz, are
Don't
you?
say don't care. You just won't get a fight.
Peter doesn't care about traffic safety.
That's right.
No, just. Franz, are you okay if Liz reclaims her role on the traffic safety committee?
I think I need to be considering what I can exact in return for that.
Oh, I see.
What, for getting up at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday?
Yeah, it's a meeting that starts at 8 a.m.
Of the members, these are the two that I feel like could.
No, I'm just trying to manipulate the situation since she already has declared that it's what she
She's
wants.
already inked it. Franz.
Okay, so
You think so?
Franz will claim his pound of political
Try
flesh.
as you might,
Okay, I'll
Franz,
collect later.
Okay,
there will
so
be no flesh.
You can have it.
Liz, congratulations. Welcome back to traffic safety.
A dubious honor, but thank you.
Daniel, I believe you were on rental housing improvement program, or was that?
I?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay,
So
I'm happy to continue my service.
great, welcome.
I don't believe we met.
Other committees, Franz, or
What's the Deerfield Valley Communications Union District Governing Board? That sounds
Alternate.
that's my.
Alternate's the alternate.
That's the DV fiber. I've been the alternate on it. And it's been pretty enjoyable. You don't, I kind of want it again, but if you want it, you can have it. Basically you read a lot of emails. It's probably one of the most organized boards I've ever been an alternate on. They're
Oh,
very,
then it's got no for me.
okay.
All right.
All right.
No, is this so? But what does it do, honestly?
I can let Patrick sort of explain a little bit more, who's the actually like acting member on it.
So, let's see, off the cuff, what is the Deerfield Valley Communication Union District? So, the Deerfield Valley Communication Union District is itself a Vermont municipality. It is a municipality made up of 24 member towns. So in many ways, it's a lot like the Waste District, right? That is itself a municipality, but it's got participating member towns. Brattleboro is a member, and there are 23 other members. We're one of 9 communication union districts throughout the state of Vermont. Communication union districts were established as an instrument that communities could employ to develop high-speed internet service for rural communities. And so we, along with the other 23 towns, formed a communication union district and have been working for the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, I guess, in developing a plan to roll out a fiber optic-based internet service in the rural portions of the 24 towns. We have successfully secured something on the order of $27 million worth of investment. We are building fiber as we speak. I would say that Brattleboro is largely considered a very well-served towns by the standard of the Deerfield Valley Communication Union District. However, there are some portions of Brattleboro, in particularly up Sunset Lake Road, up Ames Hill Road, and a few others that are unserved or not served very well. And so our participation in this regional collaborative effort is to help to expand upon the high-speed internet services that are available in those parts of town.
And I think like I'm in a place now where I really believe that access to high-speed internet is almost a human right, you know, to be able to do many things.
COVID showed us nothing,
Exactly.
it showed us that.
So the work of the work done here is really critical. And the fact that there are community members in Brattleboro who do not have access to high-speed internet is a problem,
Yeah.
even if it's a small percentage.
Agreed. Did you want to continue on?
It seems like you've got interest. So Peter, you're on.
Yeah.
Welcome. Okay, so the other ones that are pretty interesting, Franz, you don't have one yet. Small Business Assistance Program Loan Committee is a pretty interesting one. There's a brief explanation on the second page, but basically they meet not super regularly, but
As opposed to the ones that meet rarely, this one meets occasionally.
yeah. I don't know, Patrick, do you have off the top of your head how many times they met last year?
I believe once.
Okay.
But you know, it varies from probably one or two or maybe three, depending upon
How much is it?
applicants and, you know, also fund availability.
Because as we pay out the small business loans, they come in slowly to refill it. And so our availability, I don't really know what the availability is right now.
If I had to ballpark it, I think we have within the town's revolving loan fund about 120,000, and that is the pool of funds from which the Small Business Assistance Program, the Rental Housing Improvement Program, the Disaster Relief Loan Program, and any select board discretionary spending is drawn from.
So kind of interesting.
I've been on that committee. I could talk about it.
Yeah. Try to sell Franz on it more.
Well,
I'm happy to do any of them. I
yeah,
don't,
Oh.
I mean,
the town
I won't
staff.
buy it.
you can put me down for whatever you want.
All right, Franz, welcome to the small business.
It is interesting and you get to use your judgment.
Liz, hazard mitigation.
Sure.
Great.
I've already got traffic safety.
I
I
know.
don't want to hog it, you know.
Yeah. I will be on capital grant review and I will have one board member join me. If there's anyone of interest. Peter,
Sure.
welcome. Excellent. I believe, is the Windham Solid Waste Management District Board of Supervisors on here so that we could kick John off as an alternate if we wanted to?
No.
Oh, okay.
You could definitely take John off if you wanted to. You could take me off as well. But if you wish for me to continue to be your representative, then they're going to want to know that you've sort of authorized that.
Okay.
There's history there. That
Yes, yeah, I'm aware. Yeah, so Patrick, you've been doing a great job on there as the representative. Do you want to speak at all to it or?
No.
Okay. Great. And then we just appointed the Windham Regional
thank you.
Commission members. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, do I need to?
I think a motion to make these appointments.
Yeah, absolutely.
Daniel, what are you?
Me?
Rental.
Rental thing.
The rental.
So in that case, I take a motion.
Who's small
I
business?
motion that we accept the
Slate.
the slate of appointments as a slate as discussed.
Excellent. Peter has made a motion to approve the slate of appointments as discussed. Any further discussion?
Who's the small business person?
Small business is Franz.
Thank you.
It's with a Z.
Okay,
What was that?
board,
I noticed it and then I lost track of it.
It's on the certificate of appointment,
what's up?
the misspelling.
Oh. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That'll carry 5-0. Okay, we'll move on to select board goals. I'm gonna toss this over to
John?
Yes, so instead of trying to come up with select board goals tonight, I wanted to offer a alternative suggestion. And really, I feel like a good relationship between the select board and the town manager and the town staff is based on having very clear goals, strong communication, and shared expectations about where you want to go. So one way to help build this sort of strong relationship that I've had experience with in the past is by having a board retreat and having an offsite meeting where the board is able to talk through kind of your longer range vision around where you want to see the town in the long run. And then drilling that down to shorter term goals, in which, for example, here could be done by fiscal year. And so it might be a conversation around what in fiscal 24 with the budget already approved, is there flexibility or goals that we might want to target or prioritize for the upcoming fiscal year. Likewise, what are some of the short-term goals for developing a fiscal 25 budget might you want staff to focus on? So kind of having some conversations around that could easily be informed by department heads coming to the retreat and telling you a little bit about what's on their minds and give you an opportunity to have a conversation around, just kind of moving forward. So that was the thought. It would be a retreat that would, of course, be a warned public meeting, and but maybe it might not be a regular session of the select board. It could be something potentially at an alternate location that was a little more conducive to conversation. What else? I think that's pretty much it. It's really just a suggestion. I think it could help build communications between the staff and the board, and also start to align that with the budgetary process. And we just want to toss that out and see what you thought.
Great, thank you very much, John. I just want to sort of speak to, for a moment, the kind of alternative that the board has done in years past when it came to goals before we worked with John as our town manager. We've kind of just like hammered out a long list, usually, of a bunch of different things that the board is interested in. There isn't really much engagement with municipal staff, with department heads about what department head goals are considering and are already in the works, for example. And at least in my personal opinion, and I'm only speaking for myself, I haven't found it to be a particularly productive use of the board's time. And I also haven't really found that it's helped us achieve those goals. And that's the more important thing. It's made us feel kind of good. It made me feel good in the moment about saying these things that are important to me. But without that interfacing with the municipal staff and specifically with the town manager in really figuring out, hammering down those goals and getting to a achievable understanding of like where things are at, it's not particularly effective in my opinion. So I'm really excited about this idea. John brings this, from my understanding, from experience managing in other roles and in other locales, and I think it's a really cool idea to bring to Brattleboro. And if we decide to go with it, I'd also love to see boards in the future continue it.
I will tell you, having served on a myriad of nonprofit boards, that these retreats, though sometimes you hate to give up that Saturday morning, but there's always bagels. They are invaluable. It's where the rubber hits the road, and especially as this is presented, being able to talk to people within the municipality that we're going to be essentially making decisions on and how that's going to impact them, I think will help kind of hammer that out and run that smoothly if there's buy-in, and if we're understanding exactly how it's going to impact them. So I'm a big fan of retreats like this.
Excellent. Thank you, Peter. Other board members? Liz?
I fully support this. I think it's a breath of fresh air in terms of melding our practical needs with our vision and goals. And I thank John very much for suggesting it.
Great. Thank you, Liz. Other board members, thoughts, questions? Franz?
I definitely want to do it.
Daniel?
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I'm open to it. I think, I've been part of two previous attempts at this process. One was a little more top down. The other one was more bottom up. And this one maybe is somewhere in between. So.
Great. Yeah, I forgot that my first year on the board, it was the middle of COVID. And so we just didn't even talk about, our goal was to make it through the first year of the pandemic. That was the goal. So.
And we did.
Mostly, yeah. Yes. Okay.
Well, thank you for considering that. We'll make some plans and try to do that sometime in the May, June timeframe, and we'll do it with staff assisting, so we don't plan to have a big budget or anything on it. So.
Cool. Great.
We'll figure out bagels.
Right. But we will try to find bagels.
Kind of a bring your own.
Bring your own bagel.
That was great.
Excellent. Do you need a vote for that? I think
No, I think I got pretty good head nods there, and we'll.
Even Daniel.
Thank you very much, John, for that presentation. Okay, so we're going to move on to the last one. Oh boy, my favorite of the housekeeping: select board rules for conduct of meetings and hearings.
Spoken like a lawyer.
What's that?
Spoken like a lawyer.
Yes. So these before us are the proposed rules for conduct of meetings and hearings for the Brattleboro Select Board of April 2023. They are mostly based off of the adopted rules of the Select Board last year, except for one exception, which is agenda item A4, which is a red line that I'm going to actually look to Bob on if he wants to speak to it, because I believe this was a proposal coming from him. Is that accurate or not?
Partly, we were trying to figure out ways to make select board meetings go more efficiently. And when we have various recessing into different commissioners, such as liquor commissioners, utility commissioners, water, sewer, et cetera, the thought was to create a rule that would dispense with having to recess to that and just take that up as the select board in regular business. So I went back and I was looking under the liquor laws and liquor commissioners, and it simply says the select board shall act as local liquor commissioners, local board of health, local board of, water commissioners, sewer commissioners. There's nothing that says when you have a meeting that you have to actually recess into that. So we thought if we could just dispense with that, it would allow you to structure where these things go in your agenda to put them based on your priority and agenda setting. And it would also save time with the various formal motions back and forth. So that's why that proposal in number 4 is new this year for your consideration.
And we're legally allowed to do it that way.
Yes.
So yes.
I'm all for that.
Great. Yeah, it might seem
It's like a non-brainer. It's like a no-brainer.
Yeah. So without this change to the rule, we used to have to, or we would have to if we didn't adopt this, kind of put this in its separate structure in the agenda, and it always kind of made it harder to move things around and have to sort of structure it around these. So being able to sort of implement them inside of the regular warrant one.
I already bought it.
Peter's already bought it.
Sold.
Great.
All right.
So we got buy-in on that one. Are there, so this is an opportunity, select board, to consider any other changes. I will tell you, I've got a couple of thoughts that I would like to speak to, but I don't want to speak first. So Daniel, there we go. Thanks.
I would like for us to sort of tidy up the pronouns in this. Might seem like small potatoes, but I think that, well, I have no idea what all of your pronouns are, but I think that the presence of these sort of binary his, her, him or herself throughout this document is unnecessary and could be fixed with, words like there or the select board or the chair. And so I've identified 8 million different places where these are. I trust that town staff can use Control F and find them and then replace them with more Inclusive pronouns.
Sure.
Fully in favor. Any issues with that? Okay. So we can have that edit made. Other edits from other board members or questions as to certain rules or regulations for the meetings of the select board?
Yes, I would like to just noting item 10 at the bottom of the first page of rules there. Any rules of procedure not set forth herein shall be as provided in Robert's Rules of Order. The issue there is, well, which version of Robert's Rules, et cetera. The 800-page version actually include rules for smaller boards, which we could certainly use. But there are also a lot of places online where somebody has said, well, let's do it this way. And, and they've got their shortened version. And I don't know how similar those versions are for small groups to what it says in the 800-page tome of Robert's Rules of Order. So what I was thinking was, if we're going to use some modified form of Robert's Rules designed for smaller boards, that it would be good to specify what is in there that we would be working from, especially if it's something that's been codified by some other organization and is known to be effective for a board like this, then we could just name that as so that everybody'd be on the same page.
In the past, the board has said Robert's Rules of Order for small boards. It would include that section in the larger 12th, I think the latest edition, I think is the 12th edition of Robert's Rules. In it has the rules for the small board. So if you want to add that, we would then operate under that. And in large part, you do. For instance, you don't require a second for motion.
Right.
But, knock on wood, 98% of the time, we're not having to make reference to any of the Robert's Rules because your rules of procedure here capture most everything of what you do. Once in a while, I'll give an example of like if you're trying to do a reconsideration of something that you did last meeting, that's when we would turn to Robert's Rules if it's not specifically stated in your select board rules.
So there is a specific section in the larger volume that addresses the smaller groups.
That is correct.
And
if
I actually bought a version of there's a 200-page, it's like, for the complete idiot version or something.
Right.
But it's actually the shortened version that's put out by the Robert's Rules organization. Yep. But I didn't see in it the rules for the small groups. So, I mean, I guess, how would I access the small group rules?
If you change this to say Robert's Rules for small boards, and having looked around the town manager's office yesterday, where I thought the Robert's Rules book was located, I couldn't find it to see if it's the 12th edition. If not, the plan is for the town to buy that version so that we would have that. And that way, if there's ever a problem at a select board meeting, we have it right here to make reference to. I don't think the shortened version or the summary version that you're talking about, which is also sold in various bookstores, contains that section with regard to small boards.
Apparently not.
Yep.
Okay,
great.
Let's do that.
Excellent. So for myself, I wanted to take a moment because we're sort of talking about conduct of meetings and hearings and the rules that will govern this board for this year. Specifically A6 and 7. So there's given quite a bit of discretionary power to the chair on how sort of to conduct the meeting. And I wanted to sort of speak to sort of my plans for this year. Having been chair of the select board for 1 year now, I'm learning every meeting about sort of ways to improve the process. I've really taken to heart criticism that I've heard from multiple people about the length of the meetings. I do really believe I heard that there really aren't a lot of good decisions being made at like 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night. And so I'm really taking it upon myself this year to work very diligently to keep the meetings as efficient and to try to have us concluding by 10 p.m. On any agenda. So I'm going to so part of what I'm speaking to, I don't want to put in the rules, but part of what I'm speaking to, I would like to put in the rules. So I just want to say, generally speaking, I'm going to continue to hold the public to I think probably a 2-minute time limit for speaking on any agenda item or during the public participation. I'm going to have a clock that is going to be visible here so that people can see exactly how much time they have left, so that I don't need to be interrupting you. And then I'm going to politely but pretty strictly hold people to that time limit. I'm going to have the board make motions on agenda items that require motions as immediately as they can based on the material that's presented to them. And then I'm going to hold conversation only to that motion. And I'm going to, if the things are irrelevant, I'm going to name them as irrelevant and then stop that conversation and move us back towards the motion that's pending. And I'm going to ask both board and public to really refrain from just repeating already stated things. And I'm not just speaking to the public here because I've been on this board long enough to know that we do that on this side of the aisle too, that we only try to speak on new things or add something to the conversation so that we can move the dialogue along. So I just wanted to sort of speak to that generally, and that we're going to continue to put time limits, not time limits, we're going to put estimated times for when agenda items are going to be started on the agenda, but I'm also going to be assigning a time limit for public participation on each agenda item. So once we move from preliminary board discussion, I'm going to say, all right, we have about 15 minutes to hear from the public. We'll see the hands, we'll hear from people in the public. We'll keep them to the time that they have. If there's still available time, we can hear from somebody a second time. Then we'll end public comment on the item, and then we'll move back to select board, continue discussion, and ultimate voting or not voting or voting down a motion. And so that element is what I would like to have sort of memorialized in our rules so that someone who doesn't come to a select board meeting could look at our rules and then understand that that's kind of the structure of an agenda item. So I think it would maybe go, and I'm being a little broad here because my hope is that Attorney Fisher and the town manager's office can sort of work with what I'm saying and maybe come back with some draft language that's really clear for the community and for the board that basically lays out that on an agenda item, there will be a brief presentation from the town manager or a director or some official, or maybe the chair. Then there will be a motion made by a select board member. There will be preliminary discussion on that motion. Then the chair will open up that discussion to public comment for a set amount of time. The chair will then close that discussion and then hear additional comment from the board and then ultimate resolution of the motion. I look to Bob and John to see first if that's clear enough for some language to be drafted, and two, if that all seems kosher for what is allowed within the rules.
Absolutely, and with regard to the open meeting law, yes.
Okay. Yes.
A comment on that. Well, I think what you're outlining is really good, and I support that. I also think that the language here permits you to do that. I don't know, as you lay it out in more detail, you actually limit your ability to perhaps make a decision on in a specific circumstance. I'm just not sure that it needs to be anything more than is already written.
I completely agree with you. And I think that's a good discussion to have here now, is whether to structure it more. And we'll hear Peter, I just want to respond to it quickly. I was thinking the same thing. There are two reasons why I want to limit myself a little by actually putting it down. One is to provide transparency to the public, that we can direct the public to our rules so that they can understand how an agenda item is considered. Because this is a little different than how we've done it in the past. So I want people to know. The second is I would like to provide some longevity to this structure in the hopes that it can continue to keep meetings moving efficiently. And so what I have found is that rules that are in here are often considered, at least considered by the next board. So if it's not in here at all, the next board may be entirely different or mostly different and may not even consider it. That said, you're absolutely right. The chair can really do whatever they want when it comes to how to run the meeting up to a certain point. And it doesn't need to be written in here at all. So I don't know. It's kind of, this is more up to you, to us to decide whether you want. I'm telling you, this is what I'm going to do. So it's up to you if you want to put it in the rules or not.
I again, speaking to complete transparency and making sure that the messaging and the expectations are set before you walk through the door. I think it makes it clean. It makes it understandable. I would even suggest that we hang something on the wall that says, here's when you walk through here, here's your code of conduct. Here's what our expectation is. Here's what the standard you'll be held to go to it. And I think if you can do this effectively, you will create more civic engagement of people who are coming in saying, well, most of these meetings are letting out at a decent time. They're not going till almost midnight. I'll go so that I can speak my piece. And I think you will get more people in here talking about topics that they might be passionate about. So.
Okay. Liz.
I think that these rules can be written in a way that lays out what you desire and also gives you flexibility to depart from that.
Yeah.
As needed.
And I appreciate that. And I think I would like it to be so that there is flexibility, because there will inevitably be times when there's going to require flexibility for.
And you can put a shot clock down here and people won't pay attention to it.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be, I don't know. I think we'll see. I think I like that more than me trying to keep track on my own.
Yep,
And then
I agree.
People. So, Daniel, any thoughts on?
I note that it is 8:30 and even in this fairly non-controversial agenda, we've managed to run about 20 minutes after.
Actually, the warrant agenda is
There are some mistakes.
Yeah, but
well, I feel like we should at least entertain your proposal. I'll look forward to seeing language that's a little clearer.
Okay.
And what I really want to make sure is that the public have adequate opportunity to comment at particular points in the meeting, right? Because what I've seen us do over the years is have our thinking evolve in the moment. And that is often a dialogue between the board and the public. And so what I wouldn't want to see is the public may only speak at this point, and now it's the board, and they don't get to respond to whatever happened up here. So I want to make sure that that is still possible.
And under what the plan that I've laid out, the public would absolutely get to speak on each agenda item after the board has already spoken on it.
Right. That's how I understood it.
Yes, absolutely.
Just as an addition there, with regard to the open meeting law, it requires in a meeting to give the public a reasonable opportunity to express the person's opinion on a matter being considered by the board. I only note that in that sometimes you get into a lot of question and answer back and forth. That's not actually considered by what the open meeting law says. Now, we tolerate that, and the board asks questions of staff and whatnot, but it doesn't have to always, you don't have to entertain question and have it be Perry Mason in a public meeting.
And my hope is to strike a balance, because I think that questions from the public are appropriate and they can help the select board make decisions. I also think that a back and forth with any one community member for like a long time keeps other people from participating. So my plan is to absolutely allow questions from the community, but they will use their time to ask as many questions as they'd like. I will make note and we can respond to as many or as few of them as we'd like, or have anyone who is able to answer on them, answer them. And then if that community member wishes to speak a second time on now hearing the answers, they can raise their hand and get back in the queue. And if there's sufficient time, then they'll be able to speak again. Franz.
Another comment?
Yes.
I think limiting the duration of the meetings and having them run efficiently is a very important goal. I also think public participation and the ability to bring thoughts, plans, opinions, information to the board in some more extensive format is an important goal. And so, you know, one of the things I'm thinking about as I talk to people and hear people at town meeting, et cetera, is how do we get information in that's not at a select board meeting? Because it, you know, that process can make for a very long meeting and a late night. So I just, all I'm really saying right now is that I think thinking about other ways to solicit opinion is something that we should be doing, and at some point come up with maybe a structure or, you know, something. My whole idea for the office hours at the library is that maybe people show up and I'll hear more about what they have to say in greater detail and can, you know, bring some of that back here if it seems like that would be a good part of the process. So I would just encourage others to be thinking about, you know, what we can do individually, but also perhaps structurally as a board to solicit, encourage input into the important topics.
Great. Thank you, Franz. Any other things that we want to speak to on? So we're not going to approve this tonight because we've got some proposed language plus some language that needs to change as far as pronouns go in this. So we'll have this come before the board a second time. My understanding is without adopted new rules that will continue to operate under the previously adopted rules until we figure out how we're ruling ourselves. Good. Cool. Any other before we move on? Oh, I see one hand from the public. Dick?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. You know, Ian, one of the issues that you have is what's on your agenda. And certainly being in the role that you're in and also being in the vice chair's position for several years, you know, when you're putting that agenda together, you've got to be looking at what items are going to take a long time and might have a lot of conversation from the public and possibly the board. But I agree with Franz, trying to just put someone in a time capsule for 3 minutes. I can understand that to a certain degree, but if people speak once and they want to get back up, and just because you put a time limit on the agenda item is, in my opinion, not a good way to run a meeting. I've listened to you guys talk on numerous occasions, and it has been good debate to listen to you board members go back and forth. But you should continue to do that, but not at the expense of the public voicing their opinion on things that you have said or asking you questions. Now, tonight I asked you a couple of questions, and I mean, the second time I said I'd like to hang on because I might have a follow-up, and I appreciated the fact that I thought my hand went down, and obviously Patrick must have kept it up, and I didn't have a follow-up question. But there are times when I listen to everybody and listen to somebody else speak, and I go, oh yeah, that makes me think of something, and I want to get up and ask a question. I mean, that's the back and forth I want to see from my select board to the public, whether I'm a participant in that conversation or not, if I'm just a viewer. So I think you really, you know, putting that agenda together is really one of the critical pieces of good use of your time. And having you guys go to 11 o'clock at night, is not a good use of your time. And I've been there. I know that because you start to lose your focus after about 9:30. And if you're there, the later you go, the less focus you have. And sometimes things get rushed through that shouldn't be rushed through. So if you have a comment on that, I'll listen to it. If not, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dick. Yeah, I think there are a lot of different ways to run a meeting. And it's a balancing act to try to ensure that you have as much participation from the board and from the public as you possibly can, while also trying to keep it as efficient as possible so that you aren't making decisions at 11 o'clock at night. And I think one of the beautiful things about having many chairs of many select boards, boards of aldermen, city councils across the state is that there are lots of different ways to run the meeting. And I think all I can say is that I'm going to continue to try to maintain that balance and do as best of a job as I can of achieving as much of both of those things, efficiency and civic engagement and participation, as I can as the chair of this board. So is there, oh, yes. Well, yeah, Frick, we got a hand.
Frick's by District 3. It is my recollection that your email addresses are on the town website, which is a wonderful way to communicate with the board.
Phone numbers too.
Yeah.
And actual addresses to send mail.
Yeah.
Those are for.
So we will bring you back another red line on this.
Yes, I've got one other hand. Gary, if we can keep it very brief, I would like to move on.
Have a break after this?
Yes, we can have a break.
Hi, Gary Stroud, District 2. I will power through this for you, E and ASAP. Welcome all and no new members. Two things quick. I wanted to say also with something, the topics do come up to kind of make it real brief for some of the people out there that are new and that have probably just signed up to and coming on out here in Zooland, to make sure that the topics like we do even in RTM town represent, make sure they're germane, that kind of speeds things up so we're not going off to a tangent. And anyone that answers your questions are not talking randomly that off the topic or off the subject that's not germane to what it is that you're talking about or on the agenda. And I was thinking also too, we could probably flash up there. I don't know if that's too much for Patrick. I don't want to overwhelm him. Like we do it at the meeting, flash up there what that particular agenda is being talked about so people out here in Zooland can see what the topic is that's being talked about, as well as in public too. So that way they're not talking about another piece of the agenda that you're not currently talking about. That's all.
Great. Thank you very much, Gary. And I appreciate you keeping that brief. Okay, so I think unless there's absent any other concerns or comments that we'd like to have addressed on the rules, I think we've given some clear guidance for some edits. So this will come back before the board at the second meeting in April, and we'll have it for another consideration. All right, given that, I appreciate everyone's patience that we went kind of through our 8 o'clock pause. So we're going to take just a brief 5-minute break and we'll come back right around 8:45. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to new business agenda item 8. Oh, we're good? Okay. We're going to move on to new business item 8G, which is the parking ordinance change at Community Schoolhouse and Municipal Center. First reading. I'm going to pass it over to Sue. Welcome back.
Thank you. So I'm asking you to hold a first reading of some ordinance changes to Chapter 16 and Appendix C of Chapter 16. And there's kind of twofold. There's two proposed changes going on in this ordinance. So the first one was to have the ordinance reflect that parking meters have been removed in the municipal center parking lot. In last year, in the spring, the town manager directed that the parking meters in the municipal parking lot be removed. So staff removed them as directed. And, a year later, we're still supportive of this decision. Those parking spaces that had the meters are located on
that side,
this side of the building,
Yes.
on the driveway out to Main Street. And they're primarily used by people who are conducting business at the state office. I think I'm not really sure what the motivations were at the time, but one thought is that there are people that are using state services and they shouldn't need to pay for the parking there. There's another part about it that you often are pricing parking to kind of turn over the parking spaces. The people conducting business there are generally have appointments and, they're turning over. So those parking meters have been gone for the past year. We haven't really seen anything that indicates that there's a problem turning over those spaces. They're often vacant. So one of the changes is just to kind of codify that change, and that results in strikeouts in various parts of Appendix C. And then the other change came before the Traffic Safety Committee, who is recommending this change, and it has to do with 2 parking spaces on Oak Street that are right in front of the community schoolhouse. So that is a school, and they have been having difficulties over the years with people with having safe drop-off space for the students that come to their school, for both buses and parents or other guardians who might be dropping off students. And so they first came to the Traffic Safety Committee in 2020, and they asked for a bus loading zone. And it wasn't appropriate to make it a bus loading zone at that time, because it couldn't function the way they wanted it to, where the bus could just kind of pull over into this area, let students on and off. They would actually have to put out their stop signs and lights and all of that. So the parking spaces were left as is. And then in 2021, they were still having problems. So Traffic Safety Committee recommended that there be periods of day where people could not be parked in those spaces. And that has presented challenges both from enforcement, where somebody parks there and they don't move it by 3 p.m. or whatever the prescribed time is. And it's just an enforcement challenge for our parking enforcement staff. And so they're still having problems, and they came back to Traffic Safety Committee. So the recommendation now is to make that a loading zone. Loading zones do allow people to pull over in that area and, unload people or goods. There is a period that you can actually be away from your car, but the car can't be or vehicle can't be unattended for more than 15 minutes. So, there won't be parking allowed there. It can just be used for loading. So that is the proposal for Appendix C to kind of reflect those changes.
Great. Thank you very much, Sue. Board members, Liz.
That's just what I like about the Parking Safety Committee, Traffic Safety. They're problem solvers. Thank you.
Oh, and it may be helpful just to note, so for ordinance changes or amendments to chapters of an ordinance, there are 2 readings of them. This is the first reading, and then the second reading we then adopt. So there's no motion tonight, but this gives the public an opportunity, if they hear about it tonight and they're really upset about it, they can come and yell at us next meeting that we consider it.
We'll encourage it.
Yes.
All right.
Other questions or comments from board members? Yes.
I appreciate whichever town manager it was that made the change to remove parking meters. I think it wasn't you.
It was not me.
Not sure if it was you.
I think it was Yoshi. Was
That was Yoshi. Thank you, Yoshi.
How will the unloading zone be communicated to the public? Is there going to be like a sign that goes up?
Yeah, there will be signage there. I don't know if there'll also be striping. I think some of the loading zones on Main Street have striping. I think that might be one of the most effective ways. Some of it is going to depend on behavioral change, and I'm sure there's going to be some bad actors still, but.
And do we provide, so as I'm assuming basically the issue is just that people park there and So do we have a grace period for people, or do we just tow their car as soon as they're in violation? Or
I can't speak to that. I actually don't know. I think it's tickets. I don't think go to booting or towing.
Rather expensive tickets.
Okay. Other board members, or before I look to the public, I don't see any hand in Zoom? Any hand in the room? See any? Excellent. Sue, thank you very much for the presentation. And we'll see you back for the second reading in 2 weeks. All right, so we're gonna move on to new business agenda item 8H, the Tri-Park VCDP authorized application and public hearing. So do I need to make a motion to open a public hearing?
Do you want to explain it first and then?
I can do that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Patrick, please.
Sure. So specifically this evening, the board is asked to hold a public hearing and to approve an application to the Vermont Community Development Program for an implementation grant for Tri-Park Cooperative Housing Corporation in the amount of $450,000 for the Tri-Park Infill Relocation Program. Also this evening, the board is asked to adopt a resolution from the Vermont Community Development Program for grant application authority and to identify Assistant Town Manager Patrick Moreland as the point of contact and the authorizing official. Now, before I go into any detail about the project itself and about the long history that this project has had with the town, I think it might be worthwhile to take just a minute and talk a little bit about the program and the role of the town in a program like this. So we are seeking your authorization to submit a grant application to the Vermont Community Development Program. That is a department of the state that is responsible for overseeing a competitive program throughout the state of Vermont for the distribution of Vermont's federal community development block grant dollars. So these are funds that start within the federal budget. They're administered by the Department of Housing and Urban Development to the states. The states are then responsible for facilitating those out to the various municipalities. So within the state of Vermont, the state legislature has determined that federal community development block grant dollars in Vermont must be used for either affordable housing or for economic development that results in direct job creation. So for this reason, the town is frequently a partner with some sort of other outside organization. If we're working on an economic development project, we're likely working with the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. If we're working on an affordable housing project, it could be Windham and Windsor Housing Trust. It might be the Brattleboro Housing Authority, or in this case, it is a Tri-Park Cooperative Housing in West Brattleboro. So for this particular project, this is not a town project. This is a project of Tri-Park Housing Cooperative for cooperative housing. We would serve as a pass-through. Now, we would, if awarded the grant, and I'm thinking this is all but a slam dunk, we would pass those funds off to Tri-Park to be used as part of this $6.8 million project. We would have some responsibility to ensure that project funds are used for appropriate project purposes. But essentially, we would be facilitating a project by our project partner, Tri-Park Cooperative Housing. So this particular project involves 26 house sites, new house sites that have been identified within Mountain Home Park in West Brattleboro. And the relocation of up to 26 existing houses to those new house sites, with the idea being that the old house sites would be decommissioned as house sites, returned to a green field, and have their utilities capped, have their electric removed, have any foundation pad destroyed, and that would permanently take these 26 housing units that are currently in the floodway out of the floodway and be located and situated in other higher elevation areas within the park. This does a number of things, good things. First of all, it takes up to 26 households out of the floodway and prevents them from suffering a similar fate to many of the homes that happened in Tropical Storm Irene. Secondly, as was identified in the Tri-Park Master Plan that was completed just a couple of years ago, just removing those houses would be devastating from a financial standpoint for the housing cooperative. So in order to make sure that the housing cooperative as a whole maintains its viability, new house sites had to be found. And so this project helps to solve for that. So in addition to the 26 households that would get relocated out of the flood zone, other beneficiaries are obviously all the members of the housing cooperative. And then I would argue also emergency services in Brattleboro. So as a member of the team here in Brattleboro, I know that every year a certain amount of time, and sometimes a great deal of time, is spent planning for and preparing for the evacuation of certain low-lying portions of town. This is certainly one of them. And if these households are relocated out of the floodway, that's an exercise that we don't need to do every year. So that is seen as a very good thing. There are a couple of partners here from Tri-Park that I'd like to introduce, but I would like to just also mention, I think I covered the beneficiaries, I think I covered the project description, and included the project budget. And I'd just like to point out that what's really unusual about this project at this moment in time is so much of the project funding is already secured. So, you know, this program is being basically fast-tracked by the state. We have a role to play in terms of submitting an application for $450,000, and this is a project that's moving forward. With that said, I'd like to introduce on Zoom Mary Houghton, who I'm going to unmute here.
Welcome, Mary.
The bookkeeper for Tri-Park, and also with us tonight is Angie Johnson, who is the president of the board.
Angie, if you want to join us at the special table, you're more than welcome.
I don't know if there's anything you'd like to say, Angie, or Mary, if there's anything you'd like to add or correct.
I'll let Mary have the floor.
Oh, Mary, can't hear you.
Oh, Mary, we're not able to hear you. It looks like you're unmuted, but we're not getting audio.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Oh, but you just muted again.
Yeah, let me
Unmute. There. Okay.
There we go. We got you.
Okay. Patrick did a great job. I could not do a better summary. I would just go back a little farther in time and point out that this master plan was developed in accordance with the development agreement dating back to 2007 between Tri-Park and the town.
Yeah.
When the town helped Tri-Park with funding for water sewer improvements at Mountain Home Park, part of that was an agreement that Tri-Park would work with the town to develop a master plan. And that process started I think in 2017 or 18 with a CDBG planning grant. And as Patrick said, the state is entirely behind this project, and lots of funding has already been committed. And it feels like it's like a symphony building to a crescendo right now. Things are starting to happen. And we're looking forward to it.
Great. Thank you very much, Mary. Any other?
No, Mary said it perfectly.
Just a point of order. Are we in the public hearing now, or do we have to do something to be?
I don't think it requires
I don't think
it requires a motion. I just sort of opened the public hearing.
Okay.
Am I accurate about that?
I don't, if Attorney Fisher was here, I'd say I don't think he would say there's any obligation, but historically speaking, the chair at some point has said, I am going to open the public hearing and hear from those who wish to comment.
So the public hearing is open.
Thank you.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you all very much for being here. And Patrick, thank you very much for the presentation. Board members, are there questions or comments? Liz?
So it was just in January that I was at Tri-Park witnessing them receive further utility grants from the state. and it was nice of state officials to come. But from a larger perspective, I've seen our town working with Tri-Park and other agencies as well, the Brattleboro Housing Authority, after Tropical Storm Irene, to steer these developments into getting dwelling units out of the floodplain. And I think Mary was right in saying that it was a symphony, because this has been a well-orchestrated plan that is diligently acted upon, using state funds and using the state as a partner. And I know they're very invested in making these improvements to Tri-Park. I also want to point out that I believe it's 8% of the Brattleboro population lives in Tri-Park.
Correct.
And so it's a very important part of our community, and we want them out of the floodplain. And I just commend you all for the diligent long-term work that you're making to make these improvements. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other board members? Daniel?
Yep, I have some questions about the project budget. Hopefully someone can answer. There's 2 lines that use ARPA dollars.
This is page 78 of 132 in the backup material, Daniel.
That's exactly where it is. I wonder if somebody would just tell me about those ARPA uses, intended ARPA uses, I guess. Are they from the town's ARPA funding or a different part of ARPA funding?
No, sir. I can speak to that a little bit. Unfortunately, Dan Riddlehoover, who works for M&S Development and has been, I would say, a serious architect of this project, working on behalf of Tri-Park, was unable to be here this evening for unrelated family business that was very important. If he were here, I think what he would say is that neither of these 2 uses of ARPA funding are from the town's ARPA allocation, but rather are competitively administered state ARPA funds, one of which this board actually approved just 2 weeks ago. This application for 77,180 was approved by the select board, I think it was 2 weeks ago, it might have been 4 weeks ago. And so that was part of a competitive grant process that the state is using its ARPA share to facilitate. And so because there were some eligible project expenses that could only be accessed if the town was the funding source, we had a certain $77,000 project request. And then there was a much larger $1 million project request that Tri-Park, I believe, was eligible to apply for on their own.
Great. I asked one more tiny little question.
Yeah.
VHFA permanent debt, $144. Is that a typo?
No, sir.
All right.
That's not a typo. And actually, the $77,180 was a relatively newly identified funding source. Previously, in a not too long ago version of the same budget, that $77,180 was $144 more. And so, you know, where possible, we are working with Tri-Park to identify access to granting funds. Granting funds obviously make it more affordable for the park in the long run. So that's reducing the amount of dollars they need to borrow.
Great, thank you.
If I got any of that wrong, Mary, please let me know.
Yeah, that's correct. I just want to point out, though, that part of this plan, Tri-Park currently has about $2.5 million in debt that it's paying, you know, in loans that it's paying on on 2 amortizing schedules, and those are both going to be refinanced. So this permanent debt that shows in the budget here is only additional debt.
Excellent. Other board member initial discussion, I would take a motion for us to then continue considering. Someone wanted to make one?
It can make
Daniel?
one or two. No,
I believe it's one motion.
Very large one.
Yes.
I move to approve an application to the Vermont Community Development Program, VCDP, for an implementation grant for Tri-Park Cooperative Housing Corporation in the amount of $450,000 for the Tri-Park Infill Resolution Project. And further, right? Is that separate?
Yeah.
It seems so. To adopt the resolution from the Vermont Community Development Program, VCDP, for grant application authority and to identify Assistant Town Manager Patrick Morland as the contact person and the authorizing official.
Excellent. Daniel's made a motion. Further discussion? I have 2 points. One, fully support. This is great. We just talked about hazard mitigation for a while. The best way to mitigate this particular hazard is to move those 26 homes. And here we are doing it. And I remember talking about that a year and a half ago. And it's really incredible to see it coming to fruition. The question I have is about, looking at you, Patrick, the Tri-Park special assessment that RTM just re-voted and approved and does every year. So it's basically a payback structure for Tri-Park to pay the town back for municipal water and sewer improvements that were done in 2007, I believe.
That's correct.
Is some of that water and sewer upgrade and work that was done then servicing the 26 units that are now going to be moved, and those municipal water and sewer structures be capped and concluded of use?
I believe that's the case, Sue.
Sue?
Yes, so the bond or the special assessment district is paying for the water and sewer improvements that were done in 2007, which includes the 26 units that will be relocated. The state ARPA funds that we were just discussing, that 77,000 one that is allocated with the town of Brattleboro, that will actually kind of cap those lines and bring the water and sewer to the new lots in the park.
And how much longer is that special assessment payment plan?
Mary, that's to you.
And I don't have an audit in front of me. I think it's at least another 10 years, though.
I was thinking 10, it might be in the master plan. I can go back.
And how many of the 27 units percentage wise makes up the full Tri-Park? 26 units.
So it's like 26 out of how many?
Yes, sorry.
We have,
It's about 10% of Mountain Home and maybe 8% of all 3 parks.
Yeah. Okay. I think I just bring it up because it's a little, I mean it more from our side. Like, I feel like it's kind of, I wonder if there's anything we could do to try to alleviate some of that debt repayment, considering that a portion of what Tri-Park special assessment tax is paying back is going to be for municipal water and sewer lines that are now no longer being used at all. Liz.
I would state that the state of Vermont is very much engaged with Tri-Park on this and restructuring their loans and restructuring their debt, and we should just let them have at it and stay out of it ourselves.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not talking anything about this project. Right?
No, but in general, all their projects and their master plan and the consultant they have working with them, they're on a very comprehensive schedule to seek state aid and receive state aid and for infrastructure and utilities and everything else. So I think they're good.
Daniel?
Point of order, and I was going to just.
It's completely irrelevant.
This is not germane.
It's
Yeah. And so I just wanted to kind of point that out. Like, if we're going to say, like, we're going to have a motion and then we're going to, like, I felt like what we were talking about just now for the last few minutes was really not germane to the motion. And that I don't want you to take that personally, Because if we're not gonna try and hold ourselves to these rules.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It's not, yeah, fine. Okay. Other comments? Yes.
I would like to say that Tribe Park would appreciate the town's help in any way they would give us.
You got it.
It was part of the original agreement. The town would work with us in coming up with the master plan. So whatever the town would do to. So we would appreciate.
As my board has indicated, it's not particularly relevant to this particular motion. So,
Well,
but I hear
not
the
the motion,
point.
but
Yeah.
it is appreciated.
Yeah. Any other comments from the public? Nope. In that case, I think that Daniel has made a motion. He's moved to approve an application to the Vermont Community Development Program, VCDP, for an implementation grant for Tri-Park Cooperative Housing Corporation in the amount of $450,000 for the Tri-Park Infill Resolution Project. To adopt and further to adopt the resolution from the Vermont Community Development Program for Grant Application Authority and to identify Assistant Town Manager Patrick Moreland as the contact person and the authorizing official. Board members, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That carries 5-0. Congratulations. Thank you very much for all the work.
For the support.
Thank
And
you.
good luck with the project as it moves forward.
Thank
So thank you,
Have a
Mary.
good night.
Good night.
Okay. Moving on to new business agenda item 8I, announcing committee vacancies. So we're going to read them out, basically. All right, I think that's usually what we do. So the ADA Advisory Committee has 5 vacancies. The Arts Committee has 1 vacancy. The CPCC Citizen Police Communications Committee has 2 vacancies. The Design Review Committee alternate, there's 1 vacancy. The DRB Development Review Board has 1 vacancy. The Development Review Board alternate has 2 vacancies. The Energy Committee has 1 vacancy. The Fence Viewer has 3 vacancies. The Honor Roll has 2 vacancies. The Inspector of Lumber, Shingles, and Wood has 1 vacancy. The Planning Commission has 1 vacancy. The Senior Solution Advisory Council, there is 1 or 2 vacancies for 1 term. And the Wearer of Coal, there is 1 or 2 vacancies. And it seems like we could have 1 or 2 members, depending on who applies. And John, how does somebody apply for one of these committee vacancies?
They can reach out to the town manager's office and ask for an application and that would be the way to do it.
Excellent.
Question.
Yes.
Do you need a B average to be on the honor roll?
Do you need, I don't think so.
Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none. Okay, so we're gonna move along to new business agenda item J, which, if you remember, going all the way back to the beginning of the meeting, our dear new Vice Chair Franz Reichsman pulled the consent agenda item archaeological surveys at 250 Birge Street, authorized contract. So I invite back to the special table, Sue, welcome.
Thank you.
So let me say why I removed this from the consent agenda.
Please.
Would that be appropriate to start?
Yeah, and I think we'll have a motion too, right? But yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, I'll even make the motion.
Please.
I move that we award the bid for consultant services for archaeological monitoring to Hartgen Archaeological Associates, Inc. for a lump sum cost of $69,500.
Great, Franz has made a motion and he can have a go at it.
Well, let me just say that, this seems all in order, except that it's kind of complicated. And more complicated than is justified it sitting on the consent agenda, in my opinion. So what I'm really concerned about there, there are all these, well, we're going to do this, and then this has got to happen by a certain date. So then maybe we'll get reimbursed by thus and so, et cetera. So what I really want to know is what what financial risk is there to the town in this? And how likely do you think it is that that would actually happen?
Sure. So, so what would be happening here is that we would be signing a contract for $69,500 without having that money in hand right now. We have had conversations with Vermont Emergency Management, who have an amendment to our FEMA grant in with FEMA. FEMA works at a pace that is not very speedy. So we don't have an answer that, you know, that they're offering us an amendment. They generally do. It is something that FEMA is making us do. So it is an eligible cost, and Vermont Emergency Management staff feel that they will cover it. But we just don't have that grant amendment offered. So I think the risk to the town is $69,500. We have a couple of other options to recover or have that funding paid for. The second is the Vermont Emergency Management has a lot of ARPA funding that is going to their hazard mitigation. So they have also said that they could cover it if FEMA does not. But again, it's verbal, it's an email between a staff person and myself or my colleague Brian and the staff person. So, you know, we know that they have money. They've got a couple of grant rounds out. So we're pretty confident that if FEMA's not going to do it, which they should, then Vermont Emergency Management will have the funding to do it. I think the risk is low here. There is a third option. Actually, we have an application or Vermont River Conservancy, who is the actual property owner, has an application into the Windham Regional Commission's revolving loan fund, and they're asking for a grant should those other two sources not pan out, where they would cover the archaeological monitoring that's needed during construction. That's going to be reviewed by their committee next week at a meeting. So
you anticipate that one of those three sources will come through and there will be no net cost to the town. How about the timing? When will we actually know, you know, how is this dance going to unfold exactly?
that's the problem. We don't know when FEMA will offer the contract amendment. We know it's in their queue, but we don't know when it will be acted on. We would, in order to complete the work in the manner that our FEMA grant wants it done, as well as Vermont River Conservancy is bringing some brownfields cleanup money to the project, and they need to have their money spent by September 1st. We think we'd get an amendment on our grant, but they definitely have to have it completed by September 30th. If I said September 31st, that's not a date. So we do need to get moving because there's some review periods built into the work. So the archaeological monitoring plan needs to be developed, and then FEMA and their historic preservation people, as well as the state of Vermont's historic preservation people, have 45 days to review it. And there's some public comment, and we need to be into construction. I think July is when you can actually be in the rivers doing some work because the water level drops. So we've kind of have to have all the archaeological monitoring plan done to be ready to do that. So that part's going to move quickly.
So we firmly believe that this money will be repaid to the town. We just have no idea how or when.
Yes.
Thank you.
It will be, I shouldn't say it's that broad. I mean, I think the money, we will know with the FEMA, you know, that would probably be offered within the next couple of months.
Yeah.
And if I could, yeah, and I think the bigger risk is that the project might not happen if we don't do this, and that I think would be worse than us having to eat this.
The other thing that I'd like to point out is that the town of Brattleboro, Sue, has been working on this project for 4 or 5 years now. Really long time. And this is a large flood mitigation program that will allow for a tremendous amount of open space to the town. The fact that it involves federal FEMA money is the reason why there's archaeological services required. And so I assume that there was a phase 1 archaeological survey that indicated that there was artifacts, the potential for artifacts, and that's why the monitoring is required. And so there's a plan for monitoring while construction is occurring. And I, as a matter of fact, have worked with this firm for the past 12 years. And I know they're a very reputable firm, and they will give the town the services that require. And again, this is a federal requirement. And so it is incumbent upon the federal agency to recognize this expense. And I'm confident that one way or another, it will be paid, but at the same time, the benefit afforded by getting this work done and having the full program proceed is really beneficial for the town of Brattleboro.
Absolutely. Thank you, Liz. Other questions or comments, board members? How do you pronounce the name of the company you work with? Hartgen. Great. Franz has made a motion to award the bid for consultant services for archaeological monitoring to Hartgen Archaeological Association Incorporated for a lump sum cost of $69,500. Board members, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's going to carry 5-0. Thank you very much, Sue, for the presentation.
Excuse me, Daniel has asked me to clarify. I do not work for this company. They are a separate entity, as am I.
Oh, for if there was a conflict. Okay. No, that's actually a good point. Yeah, so actually, in fact, if anything, you made it aware, we're now aware of your connection, and I don't see any reason why you would need to not vote. Excellent. I think in that case, there's just one more motion that the board could consider.
I motion.
You're halfway there, Liz.
We adjourn.
Yes.
I'd like to discuss it.
You can't, it's non-debatable.
Very good.
All right.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, carries 5-0. Thank you very much. Congrats to the new select board for their first meeting. Thank you very much to VCTV. Thank you so much to our interpreters, and thanks, Patrick, for running the computer.
Thanks, Daniel. Good night.